121. Chasing Tang San. Leaving the star Douluo Great Forest, Tang San flew another 10 miles before stopping to cultivate. This spot should already be beyond Qian Xunan's divine sense. From here to the sea was still a long way, and he needed to recover as much as possible if he wanted any chance of reaching the coast and reuniting with his companions within 3 days. Once he reached the ocean, he would be like a fish in open water, a bird in the sky, far more at home than in the forest. Even if Qian Renshui found him, fighting her at sea would favor him much more than fighting in the star Douluo Great Forest. Besides, a true successor of the sea god killed in the ocean would not be worthy of the title. He sat cross-legged, this time laying the sea god trident across his legs rather than sticking it into the ground. Closing his eyes, he turned inward. Only then did a wry smile cross his face. He had not realized how badly damaged his body was. If not for the support of the divine-level 8 spider lances on his back, the blue-silver emperor's right leg bone, and the power of the sea god trident, he would have collapsed long ago. The damage to his meridians was even worse than after he had absorbed the spirit rings of the 3,000-ton Ant King brothers. At least 3/5 of his meridians were injured to varying degrees. With his spirit power low, the blue-silver emperor bone's recovery skill, wildfire cannot be extinguished, the spring breeze revives it, was powerful but slow. Assessing his condition carefully, Tang San sank into cultivation. He had no choice but to sit and rebuild himself. He told himself one thing: the closer he could get to the ocean in 3 days, the safer he would be. Completely focused, he devoted himself to repair. It took him nearly 8 hours to heal his meridians. As he had anticipated, he advanced. Once his channels were whole again, his level 96 spirit power exerted its effect. Every circulation of the mysterious heaven skill increased his spirit recovery speed by at least 30% over before. After several cycles, his overall spirit power had recovered to about 60%, enough for sustained high-speed flight. The rest could recover as he flew. Tang San rose into the air and locked on to the direction of the coast, accelerating until he left a faint afterimage. With the boosted spirit power, his speed had increased slightly. Time slipped by. Tang San remained tense, right hand gripping the sea god trident as he flew. The sky was clear and visibility excellent, and his purple demon eye let him see far ahead. 2 hours later, he could already make out the distant edge of the ocean and feel the heavy moisture in the air. Faster, a little faster. Even someone as composed as he felt his heartbeat quicken. He would reach the coastline within the hour. 2 hours after the time they had agreed upon, Qian Renshui had still not appeared. Clearly, even a god had limits. She could not teleport across the continent. He really might have escaped her pursuit. Qian Renshui, he thought, once I take the sea god position, I will repay the humiliation you inflicted today. He was celebrating too soon. A quarter of an hour later, when he was drawing close to the shore, Tang San's body stiffened and his soul shuddered. Alarmed, he twisted and looked back. His heart dropped to the bottom of his stomach. Far behind, a tiny golden speck was closing on him at terrifying speed. In a blink, it doubled in size. Qian Renshui, had she finally caught him? The figure took shape, only it wasn't Qian Renshui. It was Qian Xunan. How is this possible? Why him? Tang San thought, dread flooding him. Qian Renshui, even after becoming a god, had not filled him with such terror. Qian Xunan was different. He had killed Tang San's father and great-grandfather. The elders and uncles of the Clear Sky sect had fallen by his hand. To Tang San, Qian Xunan was a demon. He had not become a god, yet he had killed the Rakshasa god and wielded a power that even outranked Qian Renshui. To be overtaken just as he neared his destination, this was unbearable. Qian Xunan's form was already close enough to see. In minutes, he would overtake him. Tang San chose the ground as his battlefield, the terrain most favorable to him. He hurtled downward at full speed. Below lay a region of hills. After crossing 2 small mountains, he would reach the sea. While diving, he lifted the sea god trident. A beam of sea god's light rushed into the sea god heart, and the trident burst with a ring of intense golden radiance that climbed into the sky. He then plunged into the hills. The 8 spider lances on his back fired outward, launching him forward like a bouncing star pellet. Qian Xunan saw the light. A cold smile lifted one corner of his mouth as he accelerated, spreading the 6 wings on his back. With a sweep, the golden light of the angel surged, tearing through the air. In a few breaths, he was directly above Tang San. Brilliant gold poured down like sunlight. No matter how fast Tang San flew, he could not outrun light itself. The radiance enveloped the space. Feather-like patterns bloomed over Qian Xunan's armor. His 6 wings had become brilliant, translucent gold. Rings of golden ripples spread from his body. Immediately, the angelic domain manifested. The light was transparent but dense, and it began to devour Tang San's spirit power. His forward momentum stopped as if hitting a wall. With the 8 spider lances extended, he was like a spider tangled in a vast net. Even moving a step was next to impossible. Qian Xunan sneered. Though he only hovered in the air, his voice vibrated from all around, like Buddhist chants Tang San had heard in another world, shaking the soul. Tang San, do you still think you can escape? Qian Xunan, how can it be you? Tang San looked up. The golden light around him was transparent enough to see Qian Xunan, but it had already begun siphoning his spirit. Why not me? Qian Xunan said coldly. You became powerful in only a few years. I admit I underestimated you before, but it's not too late now. Tang San, die. He did not waste words. Slowly, the angel's sword in his hand lifted. 2 wing-shaped guards on the hilt released 10,000 rays of light as golden particles condensed onto the blade. The surrounding light dimmed, as if all the sun's rays converged on the sword. Terrifying solar power surged, bathing Qian Xunan in a blazing golden radiance. The blow he prepared promised devastation. Tang San would not wait to be killed. Black light flared as the clear sky hammer appeared in his left hand. All 8 of his spirit rings had recovered. The first ring gleamed the instant Qian Xunan raised the sword. A dazzling golden circle radiated from the sea god trident in his right hand, its ripple briefly pushing the angelic domain back. He swung the clear sky hammer. Where it reached midair, Qian Xunan's overwhelming aura tore it apart. The following shock was like a thunderclap. Boom! A deafening roar rolled over Douling City. The residual blast turned into a shock wave that swept outward. A strange phenomenon unfolded in the sky. Red and blue lights intertwined, forming a circular zone that had not been there a moment before. The points of light swelled and expanded as if trying to swallow the world. Tang San stared at Qian Xunan in horror. Only now did he truly see that Qian Xunan and Qian Renshui were beings of entirely different orders. He had been lucky to survive Renshui's attacks. Against Qian Xunan, no method seemed sufficient. He felt the cold squeeze of inevitability. Am I going to die? Terror raced through him. No, I won't. I can't die here. I haven't even taken my revenge yet. I can't die like this. Qian Xunan's sword energy fell without mercy from the sky. Despair wiped Tang San's face as the radiant blade descended. 122. So-called God. Am I going to die? Tang San had unleashed his full power, yet he still couldn't withstand the pressure of the angelic sacred sword. Lord Sea God, I have failed you. Xiao Wu, I can no longer be with you. He raised his head and met Qian Xunan's gaze. That look was like the ocean, infinitely deep, indifferent. Qian Xunan looked down at him as if at an ant. Was death about to fall? The despair and unwillingness in Tang San's eyes slowly faded, replaced by an unexpected calm. If the outcome was already decided, what good would more despair do? Then, just as destruction seemed inevitable, a blue and gold light flared into being above Tang San. An immense blue and gold shield materialized beside him, protecting him. Qian Xunan's ruthless strike came down. The terrifying angelic sword intent, carrying a magnificent aura, slashed into the shield. A shrill grinding sound, like a blade cutting glass, rippled across the city. The light shield trembled violently, but it barely held against Qian Xunan's lethal blow. Tang San snapped back to full consciousness, horrified to see the owner of that shield. It was a towering blue and gold figure, a formidable young man, clad in light blue armor, tall and majestic beneath dazzling golden light. His broad shoulders and powerful muscles radiated authority. A sacred sea-like radiance washed over him like rolling waves, exuding an overwhelming, sacred aura. His face was handsome and resolute, his brows bearing an air of majesty and determination. In his deep sea-blue eyes rested the wisdom and power of the ocean itself. His long hair flowed as if in a sea breeze, the light blue shimmer catching the sun like spray. In his hand he held a massive trident, its gleam illuminated by mysterious blue and gold light. Ocean wave patterns were carved along its shaft, each pattern pulsing with the energy of the deep sea. It was the symbol of the sea god, dominion over the ocean, control of its boundless power. Where he stood, people felt solemn and awed. He was the sea god, a supreme presence, the ocean's power and sacred radiance merged within him. "If you want to kill my disciple, you will need my permission," the sea god said. His voice rolled out like a terrifying sound wave, making the entire world tremble. The sea god? Qian Xunan's gaze remained calm as he looked at the light blue figure. The sea god raised his head slightly and answered, "You are Qian Xunan, Supreme Pontiff of the Spirit Hall, are you not?" "I didn't expect that you exalted gods would even know of me," Qian Xunan replied coolly. "You killed the Rakshasa god," the sea god said just as calmly. "Your name has already spread throughout the god realm. Who in the god realm does not know you?" Qian Xunan smiled faintly. "Then I am truly flattered." The sea god's expression hardened. "Qian Xunan, do you really think you are invincible in this world?" "I never thought myself invincible," Qian Xunan said with an indifferent curl of his lips. "Isn't it you self-righteous gods who think yourselves omnipotent?" "You killed the Rakshasa god. I admit you are strong," the sea god continued, "but your strength is nothing before me. The reason I did not descend to stop you before was because gods are forbidden from interfering in mortal affairs. But if you want to kill my disciple, I have no choice but to act. I have come down to the lower world not only to stop you from killing my disciple, but to kill you," he declared. "Your spirit hall has committed many evils and seeks to dominate this continent. That kind of organization should not exist. I will kill you and destroy your spirit hall." Qian Xunan sneered. "You so-called gods are the ones who are truly arrogant." "Evil? Committed many evils? Preposterous. If our spirit hall is evil, then what of your god realm?" he shot back. The sea god flared with anger. "Qian Xunan, you, a mere head of the spirit hall, dare compare yourselves to the god realm?" "Why wouldn't I?" Qian Xunan retorted. "Our spirit hall opens branches across the continent to help people awaken their spirits. We offer guidance to spirit masters every year. Our organization allows spirit masters to develop in an orderly way. Is any of that evil?" He leaned forward, eyes sharp as razors. "But your god realm seeks to rule the continent, to enslave and lord over the people. If that is not evil, then what is?" The sea god stared. Qian Xunan laughed, low and contemptuous. "Sea god, you really are ridiculous. Aren't those who lord over the people your so-called gods?" "This is the first time I've heard that unification is wrong," he went on, voice overflowing with chilling logic. "If the continent were unified, it would be stronger. War would fade from this world. We could standardize currency and writing and bring stability to all the lands. What is wrong with that? As for enslavement," he continued, "from which eye did you see us enslaving the common people? You claim gods cannot interfere with mortals, yet you descend to destroy our spirit hall. In your eyes, our spirit hall has no rights, just ants to be crushed at your whim. If that's the case, then you so-called gods are even worse than the spirit hall." Rage flashed across the sea god's face. Qian Xunan's lips curled into a derisive smile. "What, did I hit a sore spot? You hypocritical fake god." 123. Chihiro vs. Poseidon. The sea god stared at Qian Xunan with ice in his eyes and barked, "Qian Xunan, are you challenging my authority?" Qian Xunan met his gaze coldly. "You keep threatening to kill me. Do you expect me to be grateful while you do it? Since you're asking for death, I'll grant it." The sea god unleashed a terrifying surge of power and in an instant teleported Tang away. "Tang, go to Sea God Island and wait for me. Once I've dealt with this rebel, I'll come for you." Tang looked at the sea god with blazing excitement. The sea god had personally intervened. Given his confidence, Qian Xunan seemed doomed. Once Qian Xunan fell, Tang San's great revenge would finally be settled. A pale blue shield wrapped Tang San as he shot toward the depths of the sea. Qian Xunan didn't pursue. He understood the sea god would use everything to stop him. To get to Tang San, he first had to deal with the god before him. The sea god extended his hand, and the sea god trident materialized, rippling with dreadful spirit power. He swung it with brutal force. The sky darkened, winds rose, clouds gathered, and from that storm a mass of silver-white lightning condensed into a thick electric snake that slammed into Qian Xunan with crushing pressure, an attack that could vaporize even a titled Douluo. Qian Xunan showed no fear. With a slight shake of his right arm, 10,000 rays of golden light erupted. A terrifying angelic aura burst forth, angel's descent. A towering pillar of golden light shot into the sky, piercing heaven and earth. Within it, a giant golden angelic apparition slowly took form. With an explosive collision, the angelic figure met the silver lightning. The force of the impact cracked the air, sending aftershocks in every direction. The very space trembled. Qian Xunan stood unmoving inside the light. The sea god's eyes widened with shock and dread as the golden apparition hovered proudly before him. Sea god's first form, unfixed storm. The sea god unleashed his divine technique. A giant vortex tore open above them and rapidly expanded into a tornado hundreds of meters wide. Wind howled as the maelstrom bore down on Qian Xunan. The golden angel remained unshaken. The sea god's pupils contracted. The angel raised its right arm and punched. Blow for blow, it shoved the sea god back hundreds of meters, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. He spat it away, fury and shock flashing across his face. He had been bested. "Impressive," the sea god said, scowling. "But do you think one trick is enough?" He vanished in a flash. The sea erupted, towering waves surging to swallow the golden apparition. The angel struck out with a palm, and a burst of spirit power shattered the mountains of water. The sea god planted his feet like a bowstring released and shot forward like an arrow, trident gleaming. In a blink, he was beside Qian Xunan, thrusting his trident. Qian met the attack with a mocking curl of his lips. "Is that your trump card?" He caught the trident with his left hand. The sea god's face changed. He knew the sea god trident's weight, and it had been seized bare-handed. Qian Xunan flicked his right hand, and a vast energy poured from the angel's sword. A comet-fast golden blade surged at the sea god's face. He lashed the trident horizontally to block. The blow hammered through his arm and forced him back several steps. "No wonder you came to my sea alone to cause trouble," the sea god sneered. Qian Xunan snorted. "Enough talk. Come die." "Ha! Do you really think you're strong?" The sea god's armor flared, and a mighty nine-winged angelic silhouette formed behind him. "Today, you die." He lifted his trident, and silver-white lightning roared from behind him. The heavens shook. The turbulent seawater paused as countless bolts of lightning coalesced into a gigantic trident, hundreds of meters long, suspended in the void. The sea god's aura surged to a kingly height. He laughed and aimed the lightning spear at Qian Xunan. "Qian Xunan, go to hell!" Qian Shunan's smile turned thin. "How could an ant ever harm me?" His angelic apparition swelled, suddenly towers above, growing beyond 2,000 meters. An awe-inspiring majesty, transcending all life, swept over heaven and earth. The giant angel roared, and a downpour of glowing feathers cascaded from its wings. Golden light flooded the sky and then resolved back into the angelic form. Qian Xunan was engulfed in scorching golden flames. Strands of light bound and clothed the angelic figure like a sacred mantle. It lifted its wings and released a crushing pressure that made every marine creature present bow inwardly. A silver light sphere formed overhead. Qian Xunan had completely merged with the angelic body. The endless rain of golden light flowed into him. The angel's sword vibrated and broke from Qian Shunan's hand, soaring into the sky, where a shaft of golden light imbued it. The sword exploded with radiance and dove down as a blade of golden light tens of thousands of meters long, tearing the heavens as it descended toward the sea god. Everyone's expressions changed. No one had expected Qian Xunan to unleash such terrifying power. This was beyond anything he should possess. The sea god's face hardened. He raised his trident and struck. A sharp sound cut the air as blue light met the golden blade. The collision birthed an overwhelming sphere of light, energy rippling outward with apocalyptic force. Reefs shattered into rubble, the sea's surface cracked open, mountains flattened, trees turned to dust, rocks exploded. Destruction rolled in every direction. The impact felt like the world's end, leaving everyone trembling in panic and awe. The sea god coughed blood and barreled backward, his feet gouging twin pits in the earth. He staggered nearly 100 meters away, eyes wide with disbelief. "How is this possible? How could you become so powerful? This defies reason." There's nothing defying reason, Qian Xunan said steadily as he advanced. You simply stand too high. Everything looks small from up there. The sea god's face darkened. You are arrogant. Yes, your strength surpasses mine, but I am the sea god. You will not slaughter me at will. Do you think that was all I had? He stepped, then vanished. Qian Xunan gave chase. The sea god surfaced above the sea and then sank, his body merging with the ocean. Waves rose as if alive. Here this was his realm. Here he could unleash his full strength. The sea roared. Towering walls of water surged like an unstoppable tide toward Qian Xunan. He was submerged. Then the walls of water detonated outward. A boundless tsunami tore everything apart, spiraling into a hurricane that swept the horizon like coiling dragons. For a moment, sea god and angel matched each other blow for blow. A vast aura burst from Qian Xunan. Golden armor flared, and the countless light blades on the angel's sword converged into a colossal golden blade, tens of thousands of meters long. Radiant and supreme, it cleaved through the churning waves and charged at the sea god. Each of Qian Xunan's strikes now carried the weight of law itself. The angelic force he had comprehended through the angel wings had accelerated his power to horrific levels. The sea god met the attack with the trident, currents slashing like arrows. Explosions rang out as the two forces clashed without yielding. Then the sea god opened his mouth and a blinding white light burst forth, 1,000 years of emptiness. The white radiance shot straight for Qian Xunan. A petty trick, Qian Xunan muttered, and swung the gigantic golden sword to meet it. The impacts rang like bells. He held his ground without retreat. Then Qian Xunan looked up, eyes blazing with a cold, bone-deep light. Angels dispel. His words fell, and a strange power wrapped around the sea god. The white light faltered, and then dissolved. Intense battle. The sea god let out a cold roar and declared, Qian Xunan, I admit you're strong, but this is the sea. This is my home ground. Here, I am invincible. He slammed his trident down, and seawater exploded upward, coalescing into an incomparably huge water dragon that lunged at Qian Xunan. The beast was 1,000 meters long, 10 meters thick, its body a mass of towering waves that made heaven and earth shudder. Qian Xunan's eyes narrowed. In an instant, he vanished from his original spot and reappeared on the water dragon's head. Break for me, he shouted. His golden greatsword blazed as he brought it down. A burst of dazzling light split the air. His blade ripped the water dragon apart, shredding it with overwhelming force. The golden sword didn't stop. It continued its arc straight for the sea god. Sea god, is that all you've got? Qian Xunan asked coolly. He bent his knees and launched himself upward. In the next breath, he had risen 1,000 zhang, soaring into the clouds to stare down at the sea god below. Die for me, he cried. Angel descent! His angel wings unfurled and beat the air. The ocean trembled, seawater boiled, and thousands of radiant flowers bloomed in the sky, each emitting a sacred glow. A thin white frost spread over the sea as a surge of life force spread from the blossoms, suffusing the waters. Qian Xunan planted both hands on his sword and slashed. Sword intents flashed, one after another, each laden with catastrophic power and an unbearable keen. They poured from his blade in a cascade until the whole world seemed transformed into a sword domain. Sea god Poseidon! The sea god roared, driving his trident down. Columns of water condensed into countless dragon-like forms to counter the sword intents. Two utterly different forces collided. The clash shook the world. Roars echoed and ripples radiated in ever-widening circles. The sea churned into chaos. A titanic whirlpool formed, and the seabed trembled as if it might split open, revealing something like a black abyss. When the dust of battle settled, the seawater dragons dissipated, but the golden greatsword still carried momentum and slammed into the sea god. He flinched and twisted to avoid the full impact, and Qian Xunan, impossibly quick, crossed 100 zhang in a single bound and landed behind him. With a single, crushing stomp, he struck the sea god's back. Bones cracked. The sea god howled as his massive frame was blasted backward, his ribs nearly crushed, blood spattering from his mouth. You, the sea god spat, eyes alight with hatred and humiliation. To be bested with such ease stung him to the core. Qian Xunan merely smiled. He accelerated and thrust his golden greatsword forward like a spear, its keen energy slicing through the air. The sea god countered wildly with his trident. The two weapons collided with a dull, echoing bang. Qian Xunan's blade was forced aside, and the sea god was flung backward. But he showed no alarm. As he fell, a shimmering blue liquid coalesced in front of him and dropped into the sea with a plop. Steam hissed as the water around it reacted. A strange power radiated from the liquid, drawing currents toward the sea god's wounded body and knitting his injuries. The surrounding seawater seemed to repair him, pulling like strands into his flesh. Qian Xunan frowned. The sea god laughed, booming across the waves. Ha ha! Qian Xunan, this is the sea. Its waters will constantly repair me. Your strikes cannot kill me. They will only wear you down until you die here. Is that so? Qian Xunan said coolly. Everyone has a weakness. I don't believe I can't kill you. His aura shifted. The golden light of his body went dark and red. He took on a demonic godslayer aspect, radiating a cold, domineering pressure. The sky blackened as dark clouds rolled in and an immense weight pressed down. In his hand appeared a pitch-black spear. That was his godslayer spear. The sea god's face went pale. He knew he was facing an opponent he could not take lightly. Die for me, the sea god bellowed, summoning thousands of tsunamis that rose and surged toward Qian Xunan. Qian Xunan did not dodge. He walked straight into the onslaught, then vanished and rematerialized at the sea god's side. With a flick of his wrist, the godslayer's spear sliced horizontally, leaving a streak of indescribable black light across the sky. The spear tore through the sea god's body. The ocean beside him was gouged into a pit hundreds of meters across. A spray of water mist rose as the air filled with a mournful scream. In a blink, Qian Xunan was elsewhere, an after-image on the horizon. The sea god stood with his abdomen rent, a hideous wound dripping blood and spiderwebbed with tiny cracks. He stared at Qian Xunan through gritted teeth, disbelief and fury raging in his eyes. "How is this possible?" he growled. Chapter 125. The Chosen One waves crashed against the shore, filling the air with a constant, thunderous roar. The blue sea stretched to the horizon, sunlight gilding the coast. The salty breeze and dazzling view made anyone feel refreshed. Tang slowly opened his eyes on the sand. Beside him sat a man in black. "You're awake," the man in black said immediately. Tang turned to him. "Who are you?" The man answered calmly, "You may call me the Asura god." Tang hand flew to his knee, and he bowed. "Hail, Lord Asura god." The Asura god only nodded slightly. "You've done well, but your time is short." Tang brow creased. "What do you mean?" "As soon as Qian Xunan defeats the sea god, he will come hunting again. You must quickly become a god yourself, or you will only meet death." Tang stared in disbelief. "Lord Asura god, do you mean the sea god can't stand against Qian Xunan?" The Asura god's expression did not change. "The sea god has already been subdued by Qian Xunan. I fear it will not be long before he is beaten." "How can that be?" Tang voice shook. "Who exactly is Qian Xunan?" The Asura god paused, thinking. Qian Shunan's spirit power is unusual. He carries a force that does not belong to this world, as if he came from another world. Those words stunned Tang into silence. Could Qian Xunan be another transmigrator? Tang had suspected, but now it was confirmed. "Do you mean he came to the Douluo Continent from another world?" he asked. The Asura god shook his head. "He was originally from the Douluo Continent. By rights, he should have already died. I do not know what went wrong that let him appear here again. I always feel there is a hidden hand manipulating things behind Qian Xunan." Tang San's shock deepened. The Asura god looked at him then and said, "Tang San, you must understand. You are the Chosen One. Only you can change this world. Only you can stop Qian Xunan." "Me?" Tang San touched his own chest in disbelief. The Asura god gave a small smile. "Of course. You too came from another world, did you not?" Tang San's heart lurched. This was his deepest secret, one he had not even told his father. He had not expected the Asura god to know. He was about to speak when the Asura god cut him off. "No need to explain. Go now, pass the sea god's final trial, and inherit the sea god's divine force." With that, the Asura god waved his hand. Tang San's body was flung forward. On a stretch of beach, 6 people stood waiting. They were imposing, each surrounded by brilliant spirit rings, at minimum 7 shining rings, and 5 with 8. A spirit saint and 5 spirit Douluo. Such a lineup would be formidable anywhere on the continent. Yet anxiety etched every face. "Why hasn't he come yet?" "Boss Dai, let me go meet him," Xiao Wu said, restless. These 6 were the Shrek 7 devils, all present except Tang San. They had been at the sea for some time, having contacted the devil spirit Great White Shark clan, waiting for Tang San to gather enough spirit rings so they could leave together for Sea God Island. They had felt the huge energy fluctuations on the shore, the tremors that rippled like an earthquake, but none of them had sensed Tang San's aura or seen him return. Naturally, they were worried. "No," Daimubai said calmly. "We agreed to meet little San here. We can't scatter. He might have run into trouble, but we must trust his strength." Ningrongrong squeezed Xiao Wu's hand. "Boss Dai is right. If we split up now, it will only make things worse." Xiao Wu swallowed and nodded, but minutes felt like agony. After a quarter hour, she could no longer contain herself. "No, I have to look for him." She dashed toward the direction where the sea's light had shone moments before. Jujuqing grabbed her arm. "Xiao Wu, don't be— if we go together." Tears brimming in her eyes, Xiao Wu said, "This time is different. I can feel Jay is in danger. We have to save him." Daimubai no longer hesitated. "All right, let's go meet little San." "Wait!" Oscar suddenly shouted. Everyone looked toward the sea. The churning water had fallen eerily still. The waves flattened as if the surface had been smoothed by a giant hand. 500 meters from shore, a massive whirlpool was forming, and the energy surging around it cast a blue glow over the water. "That's—" They watched the sea in stunned silence. Xiao Wu had already launched herself into the water like a mermaid, and with a soft pop, a figure shot out from the center of the whirlpool. Tang San. "Little San, why did you come out of the sea?" Daimubai called as Tang San descended, clearly bearing the marks of a fierce fight. Seeing his brothers together, Tang San relaxed a little. He landed before Xiao Wu, who had plunged into the water. He wrapped his arms around her and said in a grave voice, "There's no time to explain. Hurry, follow me into the sea." The sea god's trident mark on his forehead flashed blue. He released the vast sea barrier, and it enveloped the 6 of them. His spirit power surged and pulled them toward the ocean. None of them asked questions. No one had seen Tang San this serious in a long time. Trusting him, they followed into the water. Below the surface, Tang San saw allies approaching. Xiaobai's clansmen, the devil's spirit great white sharks. 7 enormous, intelligent great white sharks, each with cultivation beyond 30,000 years, were racing toward them. Tang San felt relief and quickly merged the vast sea barrier with the sharks, took mental control, and commanded them. The sharks slid beneath the barrier, accelerating toward the deeper seabed. Once secure, Tang San told the Shrek 7 devils how he had fought Qian Renshui and barely escaped Qian Xunan's pursuit. His friends listened in shock, exchanging looks of disbelief. "So what now? Will you undergo the sea god inheritance?" Daimubai asked. "That's the plan," Tang San replied. "First, I must pass the sea god's 8th trial and push my 2nd martial soul to 9 rings." Xiaobai flicked her massive tail, sounding somber. "One reason I rushed here was to help. The other is to warn you, the deep-sea demon whale king is not like ordinary 100,000-year spirit beasts. Its cultivation, its strength, is unfathomable. Even Bo Saishi might not be able to defeat it. You must be extremely cautious." "You know him better than any of us," Tang San said. "Tell us everything you know about the deep-sea demon whale king, its abilities, its strengths, so we can prepare." Xiaobai's eyes clouded as she answered. "What I know is limited. He's a truly fearsome creature. Even the combined power of the evil spirit orca group probably wouldn't compare. Otherwise, with how aggressive the evil spirit orcas are, they wouldn't have allowed him to live if they could have killed him. They'd have taken whatever benefit came with it." Oscar urged, "Tell us how powerful he really is." Xiaobai's next words startled them all. "I have never actually seen the deep-sea demon whale king. I don't know its specific abilities." "You've never seen him?" Tang San frowned. "Weren't you, the evil spirit orca king, and the deep-sea demon whale king supposed to be the 3 overlords of the sea? How could you never have seen him?" Xiaobai's voice dropped. "He's that powerful. He may have lived for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps even 1,000,000 years." "A million years?" Their faces went pale. Tang San's expression hardened. "No matter how powerful he is, I will kill him." "How long will it take to reach his territory from here?" Daimubai asked. They were approaching from a new direction this time. "At top speed, about 3 days." Xiaobai replied. Roughly the same as returning to Sea God Island. Tang San, are you ready to face him? Tang San nodded. I will defeat him. 3 days is enough time to prepare. 126. The Power of the Sky. Qian Xunan gripped the god-slaying spear, black and red spirit power coiling around him like living shadow fire. His gaze was ice. Nothing is absolutely impossible, he said. He planted his feet, tightened his hold on the spear, and unleashed a dense, oppressive aura. God-slaying, he cried. He swung. The air shuddered, the ocean itself trembled. From the spear erupted a blast of black and red light that exploded outward like a living storm, surging straight for the sea god. The sea god howled and thrust his trident forward to meet it. The two forces collided with devastating force. Seawater steamed in the shock, and a mushroom cloud rose where they met. The sea god was slammed backward, spitting blood. Even with his ocean shield, he could not fully withstand the god-slaying spear. He was badly wounded. Clutching his trident, the sea god drew in vast torrents of seawater that poured into him, swelling his form as he gulped the ocean like a draught. Each breath came out heavy and painful. The maneuver had cost him dearly. Qian Xunan watched from a distance and held his strike. The sea god breathed deeply, then opened his eyes. You want to see my final trump card? Very well. A cold, sinister curl tugged at his lips. His pupils narrowed and azure light burst from them. A low, melodious sound rolled across the sky. Blue lotuses, dozens, bloomed into existence, slow and deliberate, then multiplied until the entire island was covered. The endless waves drew back to reveal a colossal blue lotus that blotted out the sky, seeming formed of pure seawater, immaculate and terrifyingly beautiful. The ocean spun wildly around it, like waves under the sea god's command. Thunder answered them. Lightning leapt across the roiling water, and a great pillar of thunder descended. The sea god raised his right hand. The sea boiled, and a massive sea god wave, fused with ocean power, surged toward Qian Xunan. Qian Xunan snorted, and his eyes flared crimson. Darkness domain. A blood-red domain snapped into being around him. Seawater that entered it seethed and corroded as if eaten by acid. The sea god wave struck the god-slaying spear with a cataclysmic boom. Aftershocks ripped outward. The spear itself cracked, hairline fissures spidering across the legendary weapon. Qian Xunan's expression flickered with surprise. Before he could react, the sea god thrust the trident. It pierced the god-slaying spear, impaling it in midair. Blue light cascaded down and wrapped Qian Xunan. Lightning tethered him, and pain lanced through his body. Still he stood, a faint smile ghosting his lips. The sea god relaxed, assuming his foe was mortally weakened. Then Qian Xunan shot free from the surface, blood at his mouth, but moving. He drew a breath and formed hand seals. Incantations flowed from his fingertips and into the spear. Darkness law, end of heaven and earth. The spear multiplied into a sky of illusions, and Qian Xunan surged forward. His arms swept, and the spear became a 1,000-jang golden lance, heavy with killing intent, slamming down like an executioner's blade. The sea god countered, condensing light blue energy into a giant lotus that rose to meet the blow. They collided. The impact shredded the world around them, dust and spray thrown between heaven and sea. The surrounding ocean itself seemed torn into a boundless chasm as dark clouds gathered and heavenly tribulation thundered. Qian Xunan, today we settle this, the sea god roared, bloodshot eyes blazing. He stamped, and a dragon's roar tore from his chest. A black water dragon phantom, 1,000 meters long, manifested behind him, ink-dark, tooth-bared, all domineering rage. The sea god raised his voice and power, chanting, and the sea god's wrath erupted from his trident. A blinding light formed, shaping itself into a sky-piercing giant sword that fell like doom. It was an all-out assault. The sea god knew that defeating this enemy might bring him rebirth. The man before him was the cause of his upheaval, the source of his fury. He poured everything into the strike. Qian Xunan had been wounded, but he had not been idle. As the giant sword descended, thought struck him. If the sea god wielded ocean power, then as an angel maybe he could wield the power of the sky. What lived in the sky? Sun, moon, stars, the galaxy. The elemental gods were formidable because they had mastered laws. Perhaps he could carve a path of his own. At the last breath before impact, he opened his eyes. The cosmos unfurled in his mind, the vast galaxy, stars spinning in cold eternity. He pointed an index finger at the sea god, and points of starlight flared in his eyes. Behind him, a galactic vortex spun alive. Countless stars swarmed and coalesced into a colossal silver-white blade, gleaming like a falling star. The galactic blade streaked down like a meteor and slashed through the heavens toward the water dragon. The world seemed to pause. The silver edge pierced the dragon's head. The colossal phantom dissolved into starlight and vanished. Waves towered and crashed across the sky and sea in the wake of that strike. The sea god looked on, eyes wide with disbelief. He had never imagined Qian Xunan capable of such a thing, of harnessing the power of the sky itself. Chapter 127. Suppress Poseidon. Qian Xunan's strike was so terrifying that even the sea god flinched. The blow sent him skidding backward hundreds of paces. He spat a mouthful of fresh blood, a deep gash torn across his chest. He staggered, disbelief and bitterness carved into his features. He had expected to lose in the end, but only after meeting Qian Xunan in battle did he realize how vast the gap between them truly was. How are you so powerful? The sea god gasped. Because you gods are too arrogant, Qian Xunan replied coldly. Killing intent flickered in Qian Shunan's eyes. In an instant, he blurred across the sky and reappeared before the sea god, launching a brutal punch. Space itself seemed to buckle under the speed, so fast that even the soul could not track him. The sea god's eyes widened. He planted his feet, struck the ground, and shot up 100 meters to narrowly evade the blow. He raised his trident and swept it horizontally, aiming to cut Qian Xunan down. Qian Shunan's body twisted. He clenched his right hand into a fist and slammed it directly against the trident. Their weapons met with a thunderous impact. The sea god's mouth exploded with blood. The punch slammed through him like a hammer, his organs convulsing. He was hurled backwards several kilometers, coughing and spitting crimson. "You've got to be kidding me," he croaked, blood streaking his face. He had not expected to be wounded by a single blow. Qian Xunan's voice was a low promise. "I said I would kill you today." His aura surged until it felt as if he commanded the entire sky. A suffocating majesty pressed down from him, a deterrent force that made even the heavens dim. The sea god's eyes finally went wide with something close to fear. He tasted death. Qian Xunan shot upward, god-slaying spear held high, and brought it down. Boundless pressure poured from above, destructive fluctuations churning toward the sea god. "I am not willing." The sea god howled and unleashed a desperate spell, Sea God's Wrath. Power spiked around him. His blue scales shone with unnatural translucence. Electricity crackled, forming an immense electric dragon that coiled around him. His body pulsed with energy. He opened his mouth and blasted a dazzling blue beam at Qian Xunan. The beam slammed into the spear. The collision exploded outward, the heavens itself seeming to shatter. Qian Shunan's eyes narrowed. He tasted the power and shook his head. "A pity. Still a little lacking," he murmured. "But enough." He raised the spear. Ancient inscriptions along its shaft flared to life, and the world trembled. The spear's form wavered, becoming illusory, then resolved into a pitch-black blade that shimmered with a deathly chill, the blade of despair. Qian Xunan slashed. A brilliant, silken blade of light tore through the sky, slicing through the sea god's defenses like dry grass. The blade struck his body. With a dull, awful crack, several of the sea god's ribs snapped. Blood poured from the wounds, soaking his garments. Madness overtook him. Lightning danced across the sea god's form in a frenzy, the electric dragon constricted tighter. He drove his feet into the earth, which split beneath his force, and shot forward like a living cannon. Qian Xunan hung serenely in the air. Lightning coalesced in the sea god's fists, and he launched a double punch, energy flaring. The world seemed to pause beneath its weight. Qian Xunan tilted aside, then reached out and slapped the sea god's chest. For a heartbeat, the sea god's pupils contracted. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but when he saw the black blade in Qian Shunan's hand, he froze. The slap sent him roaring with pain, a mouthful of blood spraying as he was flung through the air and slammed into the ocean. He clawed at the surface, clutching his shattered chest, fury and humiliation twisting his features. "You deserve to die," he snarled. Qian Xunan only let out a cold, humorless laugh. Then he surged again. He melted into lightning, his form vanishing. A soft, sickening sound later, and a bone-deep wound blossomed across the sea god's side. Blood and shredded tissue spilled into the salt. Qian Xunan's figure kept appearing and disappearing, and pitch-black spears, projections of his will, rained down without mercy. Each strike the sea god barely resisted at terrible cost. Mountains crumbled, the ground split, trees were torn asunder. The world around them became a scene of apocalypse. At last, Qian Xunan's final strike struck true, swallowing the sea god in crushing power. Foul blood and gore erupted from his mouth as his body was thrown into the sea, waves towering like cliffs, hundreds of jiang high. Above the roiling ocean, a young man in white robes appeared, Qian Xunan. From the depths, a chain of lightning shot up and ensnared the sea god's battered form. That chain, the chains of order, dragged him upward and hung him in the sky, suspended, immobilized. The sea god coughed and spat blood, gasping for breath. He looked up at Qian Xunan and through grit and blood spat, "You, do you think you've won?" Qian Xunan regarded him with calm indifference. "Have I not?" His skin began to shimmer with a scorching metallic sheen. Currents raced over him with a crackling sound. Dark purple wings unfurled behind him, and a razor-sharp lightning aura instantly cloaked his body. The sea god gave a bitter, crooked laugh. "Only now I understand something," he said. Qian Xunan was not hurried to finish him. "What have you understood?" he asked. The sea god met his gaze and, with all the malice and resignation he could muster, replied, "I finally understand why the Asura god wanted me to stop you." "The Chosen One! The Chosen One!" Hearing that cry, Qian Xunan's interest was piqued. He regarded the sea god and asked, "Why?" The sea god met his gaze. "Qian Xunan, it seems I was manipulated, just as you were." He sighed, bitterness curdling his voice. "It was Asura who ordered me to stop you. Thinking back, if Asura only wanted to save Tang San, he had countless ways to do it. There was no need for me to come in person." He gave a short, hollow laugh. "No, he sent me to test your true strength. Ha ha ha. I never expected to be used as a pawn." Anger and humiliation made his eyes harden. "I never imagined your power would be so formidable. Only someone of such strength would be valued by Asura, enough that I would be sacrificed for his designs." He grew colder as he spoke. Finally he said, "Asura, insidious, cunning, my loss is not meaningless." Qian Xunan's voice was calm. "I don't care what your schemes are. I never provoked any so-called gods. If you want to deal with me, then be prepared to remain in the lower realm forever." The sea god laughed again, then fixed him with a look. "Qian Xunan, you're nothing but an insect. One piece of advice." "What advice?" Qian Xunan asked. "If you want to survive on this Douluo continent, never make Tang San your enemy. You cannot kill him. He is the chosen one, chosen by the god realm. Try to kill him, and you'll be defying their will. It will not be only one deity coming to settle things with you." "The chosen one?" Qian Xunan's eyes narrowed in puzzlement. "Even if you kill me, it won't matter," the sea god went on. "I've already left my inheritance for Tang San. If I die, Tang San will inherit my position and become the new sea god. He will also inherit the Asura seat. He will hold a dual god position and become the most powerful deity on the Douluo continent. Even you will not be his match." Blood welled in the sea god's mouth. He spat it out, clearly grievously wounded. The life force in him was failing. Qian Xunan's attack had already shattered his vitality. Qian Xunan regarded him coldly. "If what you say is true, then all the more reason to kill Tang San before he obtains a dual god position." "You don't understand," the sea god croaked. "You cannot kill Tang San. He is the chosen one. You will never be able to kill him." "Oh, then I'll defy heaven itself," Qian Xunan replied, voice flat. "Anything else to say?" Qian Xunan asked. The sea god shook his head. Qian Xunan inclined his head slightly. "Since there's nothing left to say, die." The god-slaying spear in Qian Xunan's hand erupted. A terrifying power surged from it as he thrust toward the sea god. The old god's face twisted with pain as he tried to protest. "No, no," but his words were useless. The spear became a black streak of light and pierced straight through the sea god's heart. There was an explosion. The sea god's corpse burst apart into a mist of blood that scattered and dissipated into the air. A golden ring fell into Qian Xunan's hand, the sea god's storage ring. He opened it. Inside were countless treasures, gifts from the god realm, and several rare relics. Among them lay a 10,000-year mysterious ice snow lotus. Qian Xunan froze. The mysterious ice snow lotus. He had eaten one in that other world once. It had improved his physique and strengthened his divine force. On the Douluo Continent, such things were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qian horns. "If I can absorb its power, I might grow stronger," he murmured. How did this end up in that old sea god's storage? He fingered the lotus, eyes hardening. If Tang San were to inherit a god position, this lotus would be crucial to his own plans. He needed to break through. His current power was far from enough. He also found elixirs and various treasures and a fragmented map. On it were two routes, one leading to the god realm, the other to an entirely different continent. The routes seemed to span the starry sky. Qian Xunan frowned. Could this be a map to another continent? How would the sea god possess such a thing? He thought of the world he had visited before. The Douluo Continent might be connected to other worlds, countless wondrous realms beyond this one. If he could break the world's barrier again, perhaps he could explore them. Qian Xunan put the items away and looked out over the vast sea. He muttered, "If Tang San is to inherit the sea god's divinity, he should be on Sea God Island." Without hesitation, he stepped onto the sea's surface and began walking, each step taking him toward the ocean's depths. Demon Whale Sea Territory. Xiaobai floated in the water, her massive body rising vertically so that only her head broke the surface. She looked at everyone and spoke solemnly to Tang San. "I'll ask you once more. Are you truly ready? Don't underestimate the deep-sea demon whale king because of its size. It is incredibly fast when it moves. I might buy time for the others, but you..." Tang San smiled faintly. "Not even a god could kill me. Do you think I would back down now?" Xiaobai inclined her head. "I understand. Then be on me to absorb the deep-sea demon whale king's spirit ring. It would be my eternal honor." Tang San grinned. "It will happen. Let's do as planned." "Good luck, little San," the six monsters murmured, their eyes fixed on him. Tang San shot into the sky, a faint golden light trailing him as he rose. In an instant, he was hundreds of meters above the sea, flying like a golden meteor toward the demon whale sea territory, where the deep-sea demon whale king lay in ambush. He held the sea god trident in his right hand, its point angled toward the sea, his bearing arrogant. Blue hair whipped in the wind, his white robe looked less elegant than deadly. The trident mark on his forehead glowed with a dazzling golden light, as if it were a third eye. He settled at an altitude of roughly 500 meters, an intentional choice. From the air, the deep-sea demon whale king's sea-based attacks would be harder to avoid. The water beneath him changed. The sky-blue surface darkened. The waves in the demon whale sea territory calmed, forming a pocket of unnaturally still water surrounded by the usual undulations. The air itself seemed denser, slightly twisting. Tang San's expression did not change. Blue-gold light shimmered beneath his feet as spirit rings appeared along his body. He passed the sea god trident to his left hand and pointed his right hand down. Rich blue-gold radiance gathered, and the red light of his fifth spirit ring flared as he prepared his blue-silver tyrant spear technique, his fifth spirit ability. With a cold snort, he plunged his right hand downward. A bluish mist erupted from the mark on his forehead and wrapped around the sea god trident, meeting the attack unleashed from below. Although the trident had lost the sea god's spirit core, it remained a divine weapon. The enormous energy the deep-sea demon whale king released disintegrated almost instantly. The solid force scattered, much of it dissolving into seawater and spraying in every direction. Only a sliver struck Tang San's trident. The seawater roared as it fell back and crashed. Tang San did not even sway in midair. He had broken the demon whale king's assault. Simultaneously, the blue-silver tyrant spear in his right hand detonated, transforming into a stream of golden light that smashed into the sea. Boom! Countless points of golden light erupted from the surface. A massive body rose from the depths, its blue, crystal-like hide gleaming even without sunlight. A single cyclopean eye fixed coldly on Tang San in the air. On its broad back, a patch of golden light was fading at that very moment. Everyone stared in shock and terror. Is this the deep-sea demon whale king? 129. Arrive at Sea God Island. So it's you. The deep voice seemed to come up from the ocean itself, and strange sound waves rippled through the air. Tang San frowned. It felt as if the blood in his veins trembled under those odd energy fluctuations. The sensation was far from pleasant. You know me? Tang San wasn't surprised that the deep-sea demon whale king could speak. Xiao Bai could speak. Why couldn't the demon whale king? Last time it had remained silent, only because it judged Tang San unworthy to converse with. How could I not know the one chosen by the sea god? But just because you are his chosen doesn't give you the right to act recklessly in my waters, let alone attack me. Very well, today you won't be leaving. Stay here. I wonder if devouring the sea god's successor can help me break through that final barrier. Tang San snorted. Then let's see whether you devour me, or I destroy you. Roar. The demon whale king slammed its massive tail into the sea, sending a wall of water towering outward. With that blow, its colossal body rose from the water. Deep blue light welled up from the ocean below, while 9 enormous bolts of lightning, thick as vats, descended from the dark clouds above, striking the beast's body. Blue and purple light washed over the whale's mass. Where those lights struck, a faint golden sheen also appeared. Its skin crystallized into a layer of blue-purple crystal, and at the same time its huge form contracted at an astonishing speed. In the air, man and whale faced each other, eyes locked. Although the demon whale king's raw power far exceeded Tang San's, it could not dominate the aura. Tang San's mental force was even greater. The whale's deep purple, single eye met Tang San's clear blue gaze, and under that gaze its aura was being suppressed. Its momentum, which should have peaked after assuming a humanoid form, slowly ebbed. Die! The demon whale king roared, suddenly raising its right hand. Purple light orbs coalesced around its body, filling a several hundred-meter radius. The air shred with the sound of things tearing apart. From condensation to launch in less than a breath, thousands of purple pearls hurtled toward Tang San like meteors, blindingly fast. Tang San did not dodge. He snorted and braced the clear sky hammer behind his back with his left hand, the sea god trident in his right. A plain, unadorned technique, unfixed storm was released. A massive halo flared in the sky, dark red in color. This time it came not from the blue-silver emperor but from the clear sky hammer. A killing intent chilled the air. On the clear sky hammer, held behind him, Tang San had already activated the slaughter god domain. Under its influence, the halo conjured by the sea god trident immediately bled red. Tang San did not stop. He spun the trident, sending out continuous blood-red rings. Strangely, those rings seemed to exert a powerful suction. Though the demon whale king's lightning pearl attack covered a huge area, whenever a halo appeared, it swallowed up a cluster of pearls. The whale's surprise cost it a beat. In that instant, all its attacks struck empty air. Not a single lightning pearl detonated. Tang San's strength has reached that level? Xiao Bai exclaimed. On her back, Ning Rongrong raised the 9 treasure glazed tile pagoda and shot 7 more beams of light to amplify Tang San. The demon whale king showed no sign of weakness. Its whole body radiated purple light as it charged. Its fists struck in front of its chest, and a purple halo rippled outward from the sharp gem set in its breast. Wherever that purple light passed, the air seemed to harden. The clear sky hammer surged, and Tang San spun in midair. The hammer smashed down at the demon whale king's head, the profound secret of the great Sumeru hammer, ring explosion. He used the ring explosion to nullify the whale's restrictive ability and then unleash that condensed energy as a crushing blow. Tang San's strike was flawless. He did not pause after the hit. Under Ning Rongrong's constant amplification, his focus sharpened, his body and hammer became one. The great Sumeru hammer's power erupted, his first spirit ring exploded. A red, battle-axe-shaped light descended from the sky, cleaving the crashing waves and gouging a 100-meter trench through the sea's surface. The whale's condensed white energy met Tang San's hammer head-on. Boom, white energy shattered, and the shockwave blew the dark clouds apart, letting sunlight through. The purple armor on the demon whale king's body separated from its main form, spinning off into 2 massive purple warhammers, each no smaller than Tang San's clear sky hammer. Its energy had been forced into those 2 weapons, which shot toward Tang San like they intended a brutal close-quarters duel. A ferocious smile twisted the whale's lips. If Tang San tried to dodge, the demon whale king could not do much. But each hammer swing laid down an invisible web of energy. A few more blows, and that net would be completed. Tang San would have nowhere to slip to. Just as the demon whale king thought it had the advantage, Tang San vanished. The whale stared, stunned. Vanished? How? It flooded its consciousness to find Tang San. Because they were so close, its mental force found him almost immediately, but its attack motions lagged. Under the protection of the vast sea protective barrier's instant invisibility, and with Tang San holding back from attacking, the demon whale king could not see him. If Tang San had had more distance, the mental force might not have located him at all. Before the whale's pursuit reached him, Tang San used a blue-silver emperor pull to accelerate, as if defying gravity, and in a blink he returned to Ma Hongjun's side. "Your opponent is me." Tang San's cold voice rang in the demon whale king's ears. He had reappeared, the clear sky hammer in his left hand. What contracted the whale's pupils violently was what followed. Tang San's remaining 6 spirit rings exploded simultaneously. An immense dark golden-red light condensed within the clear sky hammer, and a vague, dark-red figure formed behind Tang San. The sea god trident sat on his back, held by the 8 spider lances. Tang San gripped the hammer with both hands. The explosive energy condensed from those 6 spirit rings was terrifying. Killing intent flooded the air. Even the Shrek 6 monsters, who knew him best, did not understand what that red aura around Tang San was. Even on the edge of the demon whale sea territory, they could feel the dreadful energy radiating from him. Once it erupted, it would shake the heavens and make ghosts weep. Almost at once, Tang San and the demon whale king moved. This was no longer a test, but a desperate, all-out clash. The clear sky hammer ignited in blinding red. The endless crimson expanded, and a bizarre scene unfolded. The red figure that had arisen behind Tang San charged forward and merged with him. With a roar like an ancient demon god, the clear sky hammer fell straight down. No flashy techniques, just raw, overwhelming force. As the strike launched, a complex circular demonic pattern spread behind the massive phantom. It was 100 meters across, blotting out the sun. What power was this? How could Tang San's slaughter god domain grow so divine at this moment? Behind the demon whale king, a massive demonic whale phantom reformed, its body erupting within a colossal purple vortex, as if drawing an oceanic maelstrom into the sky. All its shattered armor and remaining energy poured into a single strike. The vortex reversed and thrust forward, its cone-like tail meeting Tang San's colossal blood-red hammer. Red and purple collided. Space itself seemed to twist. Everything within sight blurred and warped. The sea surface plunged 100 meters, pushed into a vast depression by the surging energies. Almost the entire demon whale sea territory was affected. Boom! Sky and sea seemed to freeze in an instant. The red and purple lights converged into a single point and detonated. The shockwaves howled across the ocean. A tsunami spread over hundreds of square miles. The sky darkened as though the sun itself had been stained red and purple. The enormous energy fluctuations shook the world. Even Qian Xunan, the god of angels, standing on the distant shore, felt the force of the collision. The air fractured. Huge cracks yawed open, ravenously devouring the atmosphere and everything in it. In a flash, the phantoms shattered. The red giant vanished. The purple whale illusion exploded. What remained were 2 human bodies separated by several hundred meters, each surrounded by violent, surging energy, the reason the sky had changed its color. The collision had become uncontrollable even to its perpetrators. The clear sky hammer in Tang San's hand disappeared. All 8 spirit rings shattered. In that mad strike, the hammer could not endure. The purple armor covering the demon whale king's body also vanished, leaving its flesh exposed and trembling. Blood poured from Tang San's 7 orifices like writhing snakes, dripping onto the sea and detonating like tiny bombs. Even his blood carried terrifying energy, proof of how devastating that strike had been. You have no chance. 2 beams of purple gold light shot from Tang San's eyes like lightning, slicing the sky. Wherever they passed, even black rifts in the air were instantly pierced, and they bore straight toward the demon whale king's head. At the brink of death, the demon whale king turned instinctively, roaring. Circular ripples radiated from its crown, attempting to block Tang San's full-power purple demon eye. Tang San's spinning motion abruptly stopped, a stark contrast of stillness in the storm. At that very moment, 9 red lights shot from his hand, and the crimson layer that had cloaked his body vanished. The 9 red lights struck a single point, the demon whale king's heart. None of them penetrated, each detonated upon impact. 9 deafening roars followed as a massive hole was blown open in the whale's chest. Its heart and internal organs were nearly destroyed. Blood and flesh tore away. Its enormous body floated backward, trembling, slowly regaining a semblance of consciousness, but it was too late. Even a true god might not recover from such wounds, let alone a beast who had not yet ascended. The demon whale king's eyes dulled. It hovered in the air, staring at Tang San with a look that shifted from unwillingness to a fatal stillness. It tried to speak, but only purple-black blood spouted from its mouth. Finally, the million-year spirit beast could no longer support itself. Its 3-meter-tall form, trailing a plume of blood, fell from the sky and plunged into the sea. Far away on the coast, Qian Xunan had already felt the strike. On the other side, Qian Xunan arrived at Sea God Island. Sea God Island was a green, living thing stretching as far as the eye could see. Plants of every variety crawled and sprang from the soil, many Qian Xunan could not name. The air was laced with the sea's salt and damp freshness. Faint cries and whispers of the water rode the breeze. Under the sunlight, the sand glittered like tiny crystals. The first feeling upon stepping onto the island was peace. The sea and sky merged, gulls wheel in a vast clear blue. "Is this Sea God Island?" someone murmured. Qian Xunan's eyes went cold as he surveyed the beautiful isle. "A pity," he said, "but from now on, this place will become hell." Then he strode resolutely towards Sea God Island. End of chapter. 130. Poseidon Temple. Qian Xunan had just set foot on the island when a voice called out, "Who's there?" With that shout, 7 or 8 figures burst from the trees and blocked the path. They were varied in appearance, but all wore the same close-fitting pale yellow garb. 8 of them stood in formation, barring his way. Qian Xunan stopped and said, "Let Tang San come out to die, and I may consider sparing your Sea God Island." The Sea Soul Masters of Sea God Island stared in disbelief. Rage flared across their faces as they shouted, "Tang San has the Sea God's approval and is an honored guest of our island. If you intend to harm him, you'll need our consent first." Qian Xunan merely shook his head. "I knew reasoning with you would be useless." He took a step forward, and terrifying spirit power erupted. The Sea Soul Masters were annihilated in an instant. No blood, no struggle. The 8 men crumbled to dust. Qian Xunan advanced. Ahead of him lay a pool of water, a sea within a sea. Strange for an inland pool, its surface surged with waves as if the ocean itself had been trapped there, though no wind moved them. Dense forest ringed the water, the whole expanse perhaps 500 meters across. In the very center floated a triangular platform, and on that platform stood a curious conical stone pillar topped with a carved figure. The pillar was covered with countless intricate patterns, more like script than ornament, and an invisible, uncanny energy radiated from it. "Who dares trespass on our Sea God Island?" From under the conical pillar, atop the triangular platform, a man in black opened his eyes. His voice rolled out like surf. Unlike the clipped tones of the yellow-clad guards, his voice carried the cadence of the sea itself. "Forcing your way onto our island, do you know what fate awaits you?" A hazy blue halo flared behind him. The seahorse sacred pillar ignited with brilliant light, a dazzling blue column running from base to tip. Centered on its peak, a ring of blue ripples expanded, forming a curtain of light above the sea within a sea. The pillar stood some 10 meters tall, and the light curtain hung 10 meters above the water, enough to restrict flight and movement. Qian Xunan met the man's gaze calmly. "What fate?" he asked. The man in black sneered. "To die without even a grave." Qian Xunan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and who are you to be so sure I'll die?" "My name is Seahorse Douluo," the man replied coolly, "guardian sea soul master of this Sea God Island. You have invaded our sanctum. You will be killed without mercy." Qian Xunan laughed. "Such arrogance. Aren't you worried your island will be destroyed in the process?" Seahorse Douluo snorted. "So what? Sea God Island has stood for tens of thousands of years. It won't be shaken by insects like you. This is the island's core. Even a titled Douluo would be helpless against this grand formation." His disdain widened into mockery. "You're like frogs in a well, daring to run wild on our island. I'll give you 1 minute to leave. Leave now or face my wrath." "Heh, Qian Xunan said. "If that's the case, I'll just kill my way in." He raised his right fist and pointed to the sky. A dense storm of blue-purple lightning condensed and formed into a giant orb of light descending toward the island. Cold fury flashed in Seahorse Douluo's eyes. He lifted both arms, and the seahorse sacred pillar flared brighter. A tremendous power burst forth, shattering the light sphere in midair. He waved his right hand, and the water before him heaved, waves rising 10 meters high and sealing off every path forward. The boiling seawater roared and surged, yet it never spilled beyond the sea within a sea, just like a living barrier. Qian Xunan treated both the sea god and its guardian with contempt. He didn't bother to open his domain. He extended his right palm. Clap! A ball of blue-purple light blossomed in midair. The towering waves dissolved as if erased, reduced to scattered motes of light. Seahorse Douluo's face drained of color. Impossible! You broke the seahorse sacred pillar's power. This formation was left by the sea god himself. How could you pierce it so easily? He sprang to his feet. Qian Xunan remained calm and silent. He extended a finger and pointed at Seahorse Douluo. A golden sword light, thinner than a silk thread, shot forth like lightning. Seahorse Douluo's strength was not insignificant, but it was no match. The silk-thin blade pierced his chest. His body convulsed. Internal energy erupted uncontrollably and then collapsed. In an instant, his life force sputtered out, and he fell, dead. Everything happened so fast that the yellow-clad guards hadn't even time to react before he collapsed, killed in a single strike. Qian Xunan slowly withdrew his hand as the golden halo around him faded, revealing his true face. Silver hair flowing over his shoulders, a handsome, composed expression, eyes bright and fathomless like stars. He walked on. The sunlight gilded the undulating seawater, scattering colors across its surface. In the center of the ringed water lay a small island, its terrain rising steeply to some 500 meters. A faint golden light enveloped the whole isle. At its summit stood a building carved from white jade, square with a domed roof. From where Qian Xunan stood, he could see only the building's outer colonnade, vast white stone pillars that gleamed with a crystalline, divine radiance. "This must be the Sea God Hall," he said, calmly regarding the magnificent structure. Stone steps descended from the front of the hall. Bathed in sunset glow, the white steps gleamed like a jade belt loosely draped on Sea God Mountain. End of this chapter. Qian Xunan glanced at the stone steps and began to climb them one by one. He did not pause. Each firm tread rang out a crisp clack against the slabs, the steady rhythm of someone walking with absolute calm. With every step he took toward the Sea God Hall, the mountain itself seemed to protest. When his foot touched the summit of Sea God Mountain, the entire peak trembled, as if unable to bear the force of a single step. His eyes narrowed, a keen light flickering across them. "Stone steps, the sea god's pressure," he murmured. "None of it matters to me." He continued on. The closer he approached the Sea God Hall, the heavier the oppressive pressure grew, an aura that seemed to rise from the mountain itself. Still, he walked on without haste or strain. Then his steps halted. A figure stood in his path. Not merely a figure, but a woman of astonishing beauty. Tall and graceful, about 20 years old, her long silver hair tied back to reveal a pale neck. She wore a white dress that fluttered in the sea wind. Behind her stood 6 titled Douluo, arrayed on either side, subtly deferring to her presence. She advanced toward Qian Xunan, and with each step the Sea God Mountain seemed to shiver. Even Qian Xunan felt a slight crease to his brow at the power she radiated. 30 zhang away, she stopped and fixed him with a burning gaze. "On this world, someone actually dares to come to our Sea God Hall," she said, her voice sweet but edged. "You have quite the courage. You're from Spirit Hall, aren't you?" Qian Xunan looked at her calmly. "Tang-san is in your Sea God Hall, isn't he?" The woman was Bosexi, High Priest of Sea God Island. Her expression immediately hardened. "He is the future Sea God, the successor of our Sea God Hall. What do you want with him?" "I want to kill him," Qian Xunan answered plainly. "He's become a threat to me." The words fell like a thunderclap. Everyone on Sea God Mountain froze. Such brazenness, an outright provocation and an insult, sent shock through the gathered titled Douluo. Bosexi's face turned grim. She spread her hands, her silver hair whipped in the breeze, and she seemed to merge with the ocean itself. Raising her right hand, the sky went dark. Clouds roiled, and lightning tangled overhead, until the heavens looked like a stormy sea of electric light. Qian Xunan merely chuckled. This is Sea God Island. What's the problem? You all seem to have a big issue with me. Bosexi's temper snapped. Boy, you know full well this is Sea God Island, and yet you speak so arrogantly. You intend to kill the Sea God's successor on his own island? A furious light flared in her eyes. She knew this young man was no ordinary mortal. No one except a true powerhouse could have slain Seahorse Douluo. But his words were intolerable. How dare you say Lord Sea God was killed by you? Qian Xunan's voice stayed level. Your Sea God is already dead by my hand. Killing one of his successors shouldn't be difficult. How could Lord Sea God die at the hands of a mortal? Bosexi snorted in disbelief. The nearby sea dragon Douluo stepped forward, his tone icy. Boy, you killed Seahorse Douluo, and now you want to kill our Sea God's successor? Do you really think Sea God Island is someone to bully? You're courting death, Sea Spear Douluo barked. Sea Ghost Douluo's voice cut through the air with chilling killing intent. Sea Star Douluo and Sea Illusion Douluo released their spirits. Great auras rolled outward. The Sea God Hall filled with the tension of an imminent battle. Qian Xunan's gaze swept over them coldly. Keeping you alive now would only make more enemies for me later. It's better to end you all now, then go find Tang San. Bastard, you are truly too arrogant. You're courting death. Bosexi roared. An invisible shockwave exploded from her, transforming into a terrifying tidal force that rushed forward. The stone steps beneath Qian Xunan began to crack and crumble inch by inch, dusting into powder as a golden hazy light burst out from him. The power of his domain radiated, resisting the onslaught. Qian Xunan raised his right hand and clenched his fist. A boundless surge of force poured from him in every direction, swallowing the turbulent seawater. The sea itself recoiled, waters rolled back, restrained. Even the sea dragon Douluo, known to overturn rivers and seas, was struck as if by lightning, thrown back, his body riddled with blows. He writhed violently several times, but could not break free. Qian Xunan surveyed the field with icy disdain. Pathetic. He released his hand. The sea dragon Douluo was hurled into the distance in fragments, explosions marking his corpse. The remaining titled Douluo had indeed released their spirits at once, but it made no difference to the outcome. Qian Xunan stood with his black robes fluttering, eyes cold as they locked on Bosexi and the others. Since your sea god has already fallen, there is no need for you to continue existing. I am not the sort to show mercy. Sea Dragon Douluo, Bosexi cried sharply. The fallen Douluo struggled to open his eyes, turned his head to look at her, and whispered weakly, Lord Bosexi, before slipping into oblivion. Dead. Shock tightened in the chests of the remaining 5 Douluo. They stared at Qian Xunan in stunned disbelief. Bosexi drew a deep breath, forcing down her rage, and said with cold authority, Then all titled Douluo of Sea God Island, heed my command. Present, they answered in unison. Fight to the death, Bosexi bellowed. Her body swelled, 7-colored light flaring around her. Her eyes went wild with fury, as if she longed to tear the man before her limb from limb to vent her wrath. Chapter 132, Tang San's Choice. Tang San had already slain the deep-sea demon whale king and was preparing to absorb its spirit ring and spirit bone. All right, everyone, stop talking and get ready. I'm going to inject the whale king's energy into you. We'll absorb it together. It'll be faster that way. Its energy is too vast to waste. Maybe it can even help us improve, Tang San said. His 8 spider lances trembled. 7 extra devouring golden threads shot forth and wrapped firmly around his companion's right wrists. Pure, immense energy flowed into their bodies through those threads. Everyone, surprised, quickly began to absorb it. Time passed minute by minute. Tang San controlled the devouring golden threads continuously, directing as much of the deep-sea demon whale king's energy as possible into his friends. He himself prepared to absorb the whale king's spirit bone. I'll absorb the spirit bone in the sea. All of you, move further away. Tang San shouted, leaping up. He tapped Xiaobai lightly with his toes and shot straight for the deep purple vortex in the sky. The red light from the clear sky hammer gaped at the vortex like a hungry maw, fangs bared. Strangely, the powerful purple vortex immediately softened at contact with the hammer's red light. Like 100 streams pouring into an ocean, it flowed in and merged with the clear sky hammer. The hammer was shrouded in purple light and became indistinct, Yet Tang San clearly felt his left hand changing, the purple shifting to red. Was this the mutated energy of the clear sky hammer? The red light spread to his left shoulder and circulated within his left arm. As his left arm transformed, purple energy was gradually absorbed. Brutality, power, dominance, all kinds of fierce emotions filled him. Everyone noticed that under the purple body-spirit bone, there was a connected red light, and even the surrounding purple vortex couldn't affect that red light. The seawater split as if cut by a blade, forming a gap. With a whoosh, the crystal-like purple body-spirit bone shot inward toward the deep seabed. The six monsters breathed a relief. Clearly, Tang San was absorbing the last spirit bone he needed, and still had the strength to absorb a spirit ring. He was not in danger. Within the golden light of the sea god floated a vast, sacred aura. Within the red light of the mutated slaughter god domain lay a magnificent, terrifying aura of slaughter. The two were incompatible and clashed instantly. The battleground was the six spirit bones on Tang San's body. The sea god trident would not be outdone. The long missing golden light reappeared on it, along with a strange mark that had once shone on Tang San's forehead. The intense sacred aura and the slaughtering light counterbalanced. Tang San lost track of time. At last, the golden light forced the red back into his left arm, and the purple light filling his body gradually faded. As the two colors contended, the deep-sea demon whale king's spirit ring energy had been fully absorbed into Tang San. He did not understand precisely what those two lights had done to his body while absorbing the ring energy, but the most crucial step was completed. Unfortunately, although the sea god's energy was powerful, after squeezing the red light into Tang San's left arm, it could not expel it. With Tang San's left shoulder as the boundary, the sea god's energy occupied most of his body, while the red light stubbornly guarded his left arm, refusing to be dispelled. It's finally over. Tang San let out a long breath. He would rather fight the Whale King again than endure that torment. The golden light on the sea god trident in his hand dimmed, but the red demonic patterns on the clear sky hammer showed no sign of receding. They only grew slightly less bright. On the clear sky hammer, another spirit ring had appeared, one that surprised Tang San. It was crimson gold, somewhat like Qian Renshui's final spirit ring, but without Qian Renshui's intense sacred aura. Instead, it radiated a fathomless killing intent. What is this? A million-year spirit ring? Or even a god-level spirit ring? Tang San had no answer, but he knew it was definitely stronger than a 100,000-year ring. Just then, a familiar voice echoed in his mind. Sea God's 8th trial completed. Sea God suit passed. Reward, Sea God affinity increased by 30%. Total affinity, 99%. Sea God Douluo Bo Saishi had told him that at 100% Sea God affinity he would become the Sea God, and that a higher affinity would make the final inheritance easier. Tang San wondered why it hadn't reached 100%. Looking down at the Sea God trident, he suddenly understood. The heart of the Sea God had been shattered. That might introduce variables into the inheritance process. Still, the 8th trial was done. He would ask Bo Saishi about the 9th and final trial when he returned to Sea God Island. He had to act quickly. He suspected the Sea God might already have been killed by Qian Xunan, and if he didn't seize the moment, he too might be killed by Qian Xunan. Tang San looked at his companions and clenched his fist. The 8th trial is past. Only the final Sea God inheritance remains. Daimubai laughed. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Tang San nodded. By the full speed of the Demon Soul Great White Sharks, it would take only a day from the Whale King's sea area to Sea God Island. Seeing the azure sea and silver sands again, Tang San realized how much the Shrek 7 Devils had changed. Not only had he reached the peak of a peerless Douluo at rank 99, but everyone else's spirit power had improved greatly after absorbing the Whale King's energy. By level, Daimubai's rose the least, since he had already reached rank 88. Oscar's physical condition limited his intake, but he still advanced to rank 85. Mahongjun reached rank 86. Xiao Wu reached rank 80. Ning Rongrong reached rank 87. Zhu King reached rank 86. With a minimum spirit power of rank 80, an average increase of over 20 ranks compared to 6 years ago, and with Tang San at their head, The Shrek Seven Devils now had the reserves to stand against many of Sea God Island's powerhouses. Their tacit understanding was unmatched, even by the seven Sea God Douluo guardians. I'll see you off here. I need to return and digest the energy. Tang-san, good luck. When you truly become the Sea God, all creatures of the ocean will congratulate you, Xiaobai said, upright in the water. She waved her front fins at the group and, with her clan, slid into the deep sea. Tang-san took a deep breath. He held the Sea God trident in his right hand and Xiao Wu's hand in his left and looked toward the Sea God temple. Though the temple was still distant, its aura resonated with him, as if calling. Sea God Island, Sea God Mountain, Sea God Temple. I, Tang-san, have returned. The final trial approaches. Sea God, I will possess your power and once more display your majesty in this world. Resolute, Tang-san led his 7 companions toward the Sea God Temple. A faint black-clothed figure suddenly appeared before them. The phantom of the Asura god Tang-san had seen before. Tang-san immediately knelt and bowed. Greetings, Lord Asura. The Shrek 7 devils exchanged glances and also bowed. Greetings, Lord Asura. The Asura god smiled faintly. Tang-san, you truly are the one I chose. You have not disappointed me. Tang-san rose and asked, May I ask what instructions you have, Lord Asura? The Asura god's expression turned grave. The sea god has already been killed by Qian Xunan. Now Qian Xunan is slaughtering the people of Sea God Island. If you go to the Sea God Temple now, you will be killed by him. Tang-san's face tightened. You mean the great priest and the others are in danger? The Asura god nodded. The Shrek 7 devils exchanged glances. Juju King's eyes flared. Then we must hurry to save the great priest. Tang-san stood frozen, putting out a hand to stop her. Juju King looked surprised. The Asura god's approval of Tang-san grew. The Asura god said calmly, Tang-san, my true body must guard the god realm, so I cannot help you. With only this phantom I possess, I am no match for Qian Xunan. Therefore you have 2 choices. First, rush to save the people of Sea God Island. Second, come with me now, and I will take you to undergo the inheritance. Tang-san did not hesitate. He looked at the Asura god and said, Take me to undergo the inheritance. Slaughter! Slaughter! The Sea Soul Masters all erupted at once, terrifying spiritual fluctuations radiating from their bodies. Ribbons of spirit energy, like a rainbow cutting through sunlight, converged on Bosexy. Their faces were carved with grim resolve. They were the Sea God Hall's elite, its true core, and in this moment they were prepared to give their lives. Qian Xunan watched them coldly, shook his head, and said with unruffled contempt, Your sacrifice is meaningless. Today, all of you will die. He stepped forward. In an instant, his entire form flared into blinding light, and a domineering aura swept toward the 7 defenders. Among them, only Bosexy had reached Super Douluo. The other 6 were at best ordinary titled Douluo. To outsiders, this lineup might seem formidable, but against Qian Xunan, it was utterly no match. The sea ghost Douluo moved first, becoming a blur as he tried to slip behind Qian Xunan for a sneak strike. Qian Xunan was simply too fast. He lifted his left hand and slapped the sea ghost Douluo aside. Boom! The sea ghost Douluo was hurled into the Sea God Hall's wall. The sea spirit beast he carried shattered from the impact. He spat a mouthful of blood, terror in his eyes. Qian Shunan's voice was like ice. I've told you, you're unfit to contend with me, like ants before an elephant. Die! Qian Xunan unleashed a surge of divine force at the sea ghost Douluo. Sea ghost, watch out! The sea spear Douluo shouted, flinging his sea spear spirit. The spear lanced toward Qian Xunan. At the same time, Bosexy swung her twin hammers, calling up 2 towering tidal waves that surged to break over him. But Qian Shunan's strength was indescribable. His fair fists carried an unrivaled destructive power. Each blow produced annihilating force. Sea spirit beasts were blasted to pieces before they could come within 100 meters of him. Even the sea spear dared only to harass from the periphery. Qian Xunan advanced as if on a leisurely stroll. With every step, the air shivered. A pair of dazzling golden wings unfolded behind him, blotting out the sky. Beneath his feet, a vast silver-white halo bloomed, and a spreading ring of golden light rolled across the hall. Instantly, countless Sea God Hall disciples felt their mental forces sink. Mental turbulence froze as their minds lapsed into a brief unconsciousness. Soul Lock! Sea Dragon Douluo roared and unleashed his spirit ability. Qian Xunan raised an eyebrow. a mocking curl on his lips. His figure blurred, and he reappeared before Sea Dragon Douluo, sweeping his right arm like a whip across the other's body. Bang! Sea Dragon Douluo's massive form was sent flying, crashing to the ground. Two transparent holes ripped through his legs and chest. Qian Xunan stepped forward and drove his knee into Sea Dragon Douluo's chest. The Sea Dragon Douluo groaned. A metallic, bitter taste flooded his mouth, and despair filled his eyes. The protective barrier around Sea God Peak, formed by the Sea God Pillar's energy, offered no hindrance to that golden light. Qian Xunan did not press the attack further on him. Instead, he turned to Bosexi. Bosexi's face had gone ashen. Seeing Sea Dragon Douluo wounded had shown her how vast the gap was between her lineage and this opponent. She knew this battle could not be avoided, but she would not yield. "Stand back," she roared, spirit power surging as she met Qian Xunan. She waved her slender hands, and terrifying sea waves rose instantly, smashing toward him. The ocean was her home ground. Her spirit ability was the sea itself. Qian Xunan stood calm, raising his right arm. The wings behind him folded, creating slicing gusts of wind that formed razor-like blades around his body. He pointed a finger. The wind tore through the surging waves, and his fingertip touched Bosexi's forehead. An eruption of divine force slammed into her. Bosexi cried out, was flung backward, struck a distant wall, and collapsed to the ground. "High Priest!" The other Sea Soul Masters surged forward to help. Qian Shunan's roar cut them off. Scram! A brilliant golden light burst from his back, and an angelic phantom manifested around him. His body seemed to grow taller. Wings spanning nearly 10 meters unfolded, making him look utterly majestic. He raised his right hand, spreading his 5 fingers. From his palm shot a ball of scorching flame that bloomed into a fiery lotus and drifted down. The fiery lotus spun slowly, radiating extreme heat. The temperature shot up. A Sea Soul Master, who was brushed by the lotus, was immediately engulfed in roaring flames and incinerated before a scream could leave his lips. Others rushed forward, but before they could get close, they collapsed, bodies reduced to cinders by the searing blaze. The fiery lotus floated through the hall. Any Sea Soul Master it touched turned to ash. "How dare you, madman! I'll kill you!" Several cried as they charged, but in front of Qian Xunan, they were torn apart like moths in a fire. None could reach him. Qian Xunan took a step and was suddenly before Sea Star Douluo. Sea Star Douluo's face drained of color as he hastily formed a spirit bone shield to defend. Against that absolute power, his defense was paper thin. Qian Xunan closed his right hand into a fist and smashed it down onto the spirit bone shield. Crack, the spirit bone shattered into fragments. "No! Don't! Bang!" Qian Shunan's fist struck Sea Star Douluo's head. A burst of brilliant golden light exploded. Sea Star Douluo's body scattered, torn to pieces in an instant. Chapter 134. The Legacy of the Sea God. Bosexi no longer had time to grieve. Qian Xunan had already unleashed killing intent. The Sea God Hall would not survive this day. In the next instant, Qian Xunan reappeared before Sea Spear Douluo. He raised his right hand, and a golden blade condensed, a 7-foot-long sword that shimmered in his grip. Sea Spear Douluo's face went white. He thrust his long spear up to block, but a numbing shock ran through the shaft, and it snapped like a twig. Without any flourish, the golden blade drove into Sea Spear Douluo's chest. He let out a grunt and was hurled through the water like a cannonball. It all happened in a heartbeat. With Sea Dragon Douluo and Sea Spear Douluo fallen, the others panicked. Bosexi roared, "Retreat!" and everyone bolted, their bodies shaking as they tried to flee the sea god's restricted area. "Run!" Qian Xunan snorted. His wings beat, and he cut after them with terrifying speed. He caught up first to the wounded Sea Dragon Douluo. A golden longsword formed in his hand, and he unleashed a golden dragon slash, the blade expanding into a massive golden sword that came crashing down. Under the shadow of death, Sea Dragon Douluo's cultivation flared. Scales spread over his body, his blood boiled, and he met the strike head-on. Qian Shunan's figure stuttered for a breath, then flicked his wrist. After images followed his movement, and a cloud of black smoke rose from Sea Dragon Douluo's body. His right arm disintegrated into ash. He coughed blood from mouth and nostrils, yet showed no fear. His body swelled, muscles bulging, scales bristling. He would die fighting. A flash of surprise crossed Qian Shunan's face. He had not expected Sea Dragon Douluo to choose to perish rather than flee. His eyes went cold, his wings spread into a phantom-like blur, and he charged. Sea Dragon Douluo roared, and his form shifted into that of a titanic dragon, surging through the water in a desperate attempt to shake Qian Xunan off. But Qian Xunan's eyes flared with purplish gold light, his presence turning illusory. He stepped as if through air and was suddenly at the dragon's head. The golden longsword pierced the crown of the creature. An overwhelming blaze of light flared, the dragon's struggles weakened, and in an instant the great form unraveled into nothing. Sea Dragon Douluo was dead. Only Sea Maiden Douluo and Sea Illusion Douluo were left. Qian Xunan reached them without effort. "You can't kill me," Sea Illusion Douluo shrieked, but Qian Xunan did not seem to hear her. Their title and rank meant nothing against his speed and power. A sheath of golden light wrapped Sea Maiden Douluo, binding her so tightly she couldn't even open her eyes. Her scream cut off mid-cry. She went still and became a corpse. Sea Illusion Douluo tried to weave her tricks, but illusions had no purchase on Qian Xunan. One more stroke of the sword and she too collapsed. At last, only Bosexi remained, the peak 99th level Douluo. "I will fight you to the death," she roared, unleashing a fierce divine radiance. The waves behind her swelled in response, towering 100 zhang and swallowing Qian Xunan. But Qian Xunan was on a different level. Purplish gold light burst from his eyes. The longsword in his hand gleamed, and in the space of a blink he stood before Bosexi and slashed. Her divine radiance shattered. Darkness flooded her vision. Her massive form was thrown through the surf back into the open water, reverting to its original shape as she fell. Sea Maiden Douluo's eyes had flashed a last, terrible light before she died. She had known she was beaten. Against that mysterious youth, she had almost no power to resist. Even at her peak, she stood no chance. Bosexi's divine light collapsed and her soul was extinguished. After the carnage, a Sura god led Tang to the sea god's inheritance site. "Is this the sea god's inheritance site?" Tang held his sea god trident, guided by a beam of sea god's light, keeping its weight balanced against the buoyancy of the seawater. Suspended in that steady column of light, he calmed himself to take in his surroundings. Stabilizing his breathing with mysterious heaven skill and his 99th level spirit power, he began to survey what lay below. When his gaze dropped, Tang San's face froze with shock. A palace, colossal, sat below, 1,000 meters down, silent under the sea. Even with all his training and spirit power, the sight nearly made him gulp in seawater. The palace dwarfed any Tang San had ever seen. It was 10 times larger than the grandest halls of the Heaven Do Empire's imperial palace. Its height rose over 200 meters. Its length and width each exceeded 1,000 meters. The structure alone was awe-inspiring, and around its exterior, a faint golden light shield glowed, casting illumination through the water. It was breathtaking. This had to be the true sea god temple. Controlling his body by the weight of the sea god trident, Tang San descended slowly toward the golden shield. He reached the edge and prepared to pass through, only to be halted by a cold, lifeless voice that rolled through the seawater, making the water itself shiver. Only those who possess the sea god's heart may enter the sea god temple. Without the sea god's heart, entry is forbidden. Who spoke and how the voice was produced didn't matter. What mattered was that Tang San could not penetrate the shield. It was formed of some unknown energy, but it felt as hard as solid light. It barred his way. How could he enter? The sea god's heart had been shattered to save him. Without it, the inheritance seemed out of reach. Tang San stood on the light barrier and considered his options, not succumbing to despair. If the sea god's divine thought had chosen to spare him by breaking the sea god's heart, then perhaps there remained a way. He assessed the shield. Its defensive strength was at most on the order of divine level. Tang San himself, by combining the great Sumeru hammer technique with his own strength, already possessed, in certain aspects, divine-level offensive power. Breaking the shield might not be impossible. Deciding to force his way in, Tang San rotated the sea god trident, pointing the blade downward. He gripped the shaft with both hands and activated his gravity control skill. The trident's weight skyrocketed. He made it reach 1.08 million jin. At the same time, he released the blue-silver Emperor spirit, pouring his spirit power outward. The sea god's light from the trident imprint on his forehead surged into the weapon as well. He had resolved to smash the light barrier and storm into the sea god temple. 135. Poseidon. The sea god's light poured out without pause, and Tang Xunji began to steer it, letting it surround his body. Slowly he leaned into the patch of light that had been softened by the sea god's power. At first it was agonizingly difficult, but under the influence of the sea god's light, his body began to merge with the luminous barrier. After several careful adjustments, the barrier sealed perfectly around him. Only then did he push more of the sea god's light into the area beneath him, softening the field further. At the same time, the main blade of the sea god trident pushed forward, its tip piercing into the barrier as Tang Xunji drove his soul power into it. The light barrier was extraordinarily tough. Without the sea god's light, Tang Xunji would have had to detonate a spirit ring to temporarily exceed his limits and break through. With the light's aid, however, the resistance dropped drastically. Finally, with a full-force thrust of the trident, there was a soft explosion of air. His body lightened, and he broke free from the barrier, falling downward. The layer of light above him, though, remained intact, showing no change. Wisdom brings boundless power. Tang Xunji knew he had passed the first trial. He released the flying ability sealed in the blue-silver emperor bone of his right leg, controlled his descent, and dropped down in front of the sea god temple. From a distance, the grand hall already looked magnificent, but drawing close and floating before it left him breathless. Standing at its base, Tang Xunji felt minuscule. Silence lay thick all around. Above, beyond the light barrier, the seawater was a perfect clear blue. He took a deep breath, settling the soul energy drained by breaking the barrier, tightened his grip on the sea god trident, and strode toward the entrance. Two enormous doors barred his way. The sea god temple towered 200 meters high. The doors themselves were 100 meters tall and impossibly thick. Each leaf was carved with a scene. On the left, the sea god stood, trident in hand, treading the waves. On the right, the sea god poised to strike, and before him reared a giant whale, unmistakably the deep-sea demon whale King Tang Xunji had slain and from which he had taken a torso spirit ring. Just standing there, the relief and depth of the carvings hit Tang Xunji like a wave. They weren't lavishly ornate, yet they conveyed lifelike motion. He felt as if the sea god were truly charging across the ocean right before him. With a grinding roar, the 200-meter doors began to open inward. Brilliant golden light spilled out from the hall, forcing Tang Xunji to squint. He was bathed in immense divine power. That smallness he had felt outside returned tenfold. It was like stepping into the sea god's light during his first trial. Then he had endured physical coercion. Now the pressure pressed on the very depth of his soul. Inside, 36 colossal pillars on each side held up the roof of the grand hall. A central passage 300 meters wide ran to the innermost recess. At the end of the aisle sat a colossal throne, and in it a figure, a giant among men. Tang Xunji stopped, stunned. The figure's shape was human. A white robe with gold trim, a three-pronged circular crown with a sky-blue gem embedded at its center. The image was painfully familiar, like the form Tang Xunji had once seen when he tapped into the sea god's divine sense through the heart of the sea god. That had been an apparition. This was something real. The sea god's face was weathered rather than handsome, but utterly majestic. Calm, stern eyes watched Tang Xunji from the far end of the passage, faint light flowing in their depths. The oppressive aura he'd felt at the entrance intensified here. It bore down not as physical coercion, but as something reaching for his soul. "Lord Sea God, you're still alive?" Tang Xunji's expression flickered with surprised relief. The Asura god had claimed the sea god was dead, and Tang Xunji had doubted it. Seeing this figure, he allowed himself a shred of hope. The seated figure shook his head. "I am only a wisp of the sea god's residual soul, left behind to guide you through the inheritance. When my task is complete, I will dissipate." "Then, is the sea god truly dead?" Tang Xunji asked. "I do not know," the wisp answered. "I have no link to the main body. I cannot tell of his true state." "Come, accept the inheritance," the wisp urged. Tang Xunji bowed his head and took the center of the hall, sitting cross-legged on the stone. The wisp's eyes suddenly flared like twin suns. Tang Xunji felt his soul pulled inward, as though sucked through a narrow throat. Reality thinned. Golden mists rose, and iridescent golden bubbles swam through the air. In the violent distortion, his sense of self disintegrated. A massive golden orb blossomed at the sea god's chest. It detonated outward in a blinding flash, and the whole temple shuddered as if purged. Lost in that corona of light, Tang Xunji vanished, swallowed up by the explosion of golden power. When the light finally ebbed, the grand hall had returned to stillness. One of the 8 small platforms that had once ringed the circular dice drifted off and hovered about a meter before where Tang Xunji had been seated. It shimmered with undulating golden patterns. Tang Xunji, racked with the after effects of the inheritance, had neither the clarity nor the mood to admire it. Meanwhile, after Qian Xunan struck down Bo Saishi, he had stormed through the sea god temple searching for any sign of Tang Xunji. But despite sweeping the entire great hall, he found no trace. He looked over the empty expanse with a cool expression. "It seems Tang Xunji isn't in this sea god temple either," he said. "But where could he be?" a companion murmured. Qian Xunan frowned. Logically, if Tang Xunji had planned a last gambit, he would have sought the sea god temple for the inheritance. If he was nowhere to be found, then perhaps another god had interfered. At once Qian Shunan's mind went to the earlier words of the sea god, the Asura god. Chapter 136. Both armies prepare. Could the Asura god be behind all of this? The thought struck Qian Xunan. His eyes flashed, and he snorted coldly. The Asura god? This Asura may not be so easy to deal with. With that, he left the sea god hall. He didn't bother searching the world for Tang Xunji. If Tang Xunji wanted to pick a fight, he would come looking for him one day. There was no need to tear the continent apart in search of him now. Instead, Qian Xunan returned to Spirit Hall, where a massive army had already been mustered. While he had been chasing Tang Xunji, he had sent Qian Renshui back to Spirit Hall to help organize matters. He intended to bring the continent under one rule, and the time to act had come. The Spirit Empire's forces filled Spirit Hall and spilled out across the grounds like a looming, dark storm. The air buzzed with human voices from the barracks, soldiers ready, faces set with grim determination. Clad in uniform battle robes embroidered with the Spirit Empire emblem, they embodied loyalty and honor. Weapons flashed with cold light. The clash of steel rang out like battle drums. Over the years, Qian Xunan had divided the Spirit Empire's military into 6 legions. The first was the heavy cavalry, knights mounted on tamed spirit beasts, the Empire's main offensive force. Their mounts loomed above the ranks, beastly roars shaking the air as long spears glinted silver in their hands. That legion was commanded by Mad Lion Douluo. Because Qian Xunan maintained good relations with the remaining consecrated elders, several of them took up legion commands to aid his unification. The second was the Angel Legion, led by Azure Luan Douluo. The Angel Legion swooped on outstretched wings, bathed in a sacred radiance. They wielded holy swords that shone like heaven-sent blades, their hymns lifting the spirit of every soldier. The third legion consisted of ordinary troops under demon-subduing Douluo. They were not the strongest individually, but they formed the backbone of the Spirit Empire, more numerous than any elite force. The fourth was the Spirit Master Army, led by Thousand Jun Douluo, made up almost entirely of Spirit Masters below Spirit Saint rank. The fifth was the Spirit Saint Legion, composed of full Spirit Saints under Light Feather Douluo. The sixth was the Spirit Douluo Legion, commanded by Gold Crocodile Douluo, Spirit Hall's second-in-command. Spirit Hall could field several hundred Spirit Douluo. The entire army radiated overwhelming momentum. Faith and strength combined in every soldier, they were ready to march to war, prepared to shed blood and give their lives for the glory and justice of the Spirit Empire. Their cries echoed into the sky, poised to break the enemy's spirit. On a high platform, Qian Renshui stood wrapped in golden holy light. Now the god of angels, she received the worship and fervent devotion of countless spirit masters. The power of faith coursed through her. A faint smile played on her lips as she watched the assembled forces. She was waiting for Qian Xunan. In this land, there were only 2 people who could truly make her wary, her grandfather Qian Douluo and her uncle Qian Xunan. Now her uncle had returned. Qian Xunan arrived beside her. At once the entire army knelt in unison, voices rising, "Greetings, your majesty. Long live our emperor." Qian Xunan inclined his head. "You have all labored hard. Today we march. We will defend the Empire's honor with our blood and our lives." Yes, a solemn resolve spread through the ranks. These were children raised amid warfare, forged by conflict. "Prepare to depart," Qian Xunan continued. "With our iron hooves we will trample our enemies and, if necessary, fight to uphold the Empire's dignity." A ripple of beastly roars answered him. The mounted legions quickly formed ranks, each soldier astride a top-grade spirit beast. They wore white armor patterned with red, bows and shields ready. Qian Xunan raised his hand. "Attack!" A blaring horn cut the air. The Spirit Empire's army surged outwards, an endless tide sweeping toward Heaven Dew City. Across the plain, the Heaven Dew Empire had already formed its own dense lines. On their high platform stood Shui Beng. Flanking him were two familiar figures, Tang Xiao, former sect master of the Clear Sky sect, and Ning Fengji of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School. At their appearance, every soldier knelt and hailed, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Shui Beng looked over his ranks and spoke loud enough for all to hear. "The Spirit Empire advances against us. We must defend our homeland to the death." "Defend our homeland to the death," the army roared back, and the shout rolled outward like a shockwave. "Spirit Hall is evil. Heaven Dew stands for righteousness. Evil cannot triumph over justice. Heaven Dew will prevail." Shui Beng's voice cracked like thunder. "Heaven Dew will win." The chant echoed through the formation and carried for miles. Morale soared to unprecedented heights. With each cry, the army pressed forward, step by step, their momentum building into something palpable. The combined roar formed a visible pressure that surged toward Jieling Pass, a living wall of sound and will. End of this chapter. 137. Siege the city. The Spirit Empire's army had invaded the Heaven Dew Empire like a tidal wave, smashing through every defense in its path. City after city had fallen, and the Heaven Dew forces were unable to stem the onslaught. At last, the two armies met at Jieling Pass. From the city walls, the Heaven Dew soldiers watched the Spirit Empire arrayed less than 100 meters away. A voice rang out across the field. "Heaven Dew City, do you really want to be enemies with the Spirit Empire? Surrender now, and I may show mercy. Refuse, and I will annihilate you." The commander of this holy war was Qian Renshui. Qian Xunan had deliberately put her in command. He wanted her to grow, and kept his hand behind the scenes as the ultimate backup. With Qian Xunan protecting the rear, anything could be handled. The two armies faced one another in the raw, tense silence before battle. On the city walls, the Heaven Dew soldiers readied their bows and arrows. Across the field, the Spirit Empire moved into position. The Spirit Empire's center was composed of ordinary infantry supported by a host of siege engines, while heavier infantry formed its flanks. Behind the front lines, the Spirit Master legions and the Tang clan forces waited, and the heavy cavalry lurked at the rear, massed for a devastating charge. On the Jieling Pass walls stood Tang Xiao, Flender, Liu Erlong, Sword Douluo, Bone Douluo, Sect Master Ning Fengji of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School, and other famed fighters, positioned on the wall itself rather than with their legions. The Spirit Master Legion positions on the ground were under the command of Emperor Shui Beng and the army's commander-in-chief, Marshal Ge Long. The tense calm was broken when Emperor Shui Beng shouted, "Heaven Dew will win." The cry swelled across the ranks until thousands of voices answered in thunder, "Heaven Dew will win." Each shout seemed to add weight to their advance, producing a pressure that rolled toward Jieling Pass like a physical force. On the wall, Qian Renshui watched coldly. Her eyes were hard as ice. Then she gave the order, "Attack!" The Spirit Empire surged forward at once. Mad Lion Douluo led the heavy cavalry in a thunderous charge, followed by the armored infantry. The two armies collided in a carnage of metal and blood. High above the field, Azur Luan Duo rose into the sky, the Angel Legion trailing behind him. When their wings beat, giant scythes flashed like lightning, raining down on the Heaven Dew ranks. The Angel Legion raised their right hands and then launched themselves onto the city walls, cutting a swath through the defenders. Screams filled the air as golden light struck soldiers down by the dozen. The Angel Legion's combat power far exceeded that of ordinary Spirit Masters. Their strength was purer and harder to counter. Still, the defenders were too many, and the attackers' momentum kept building. "Siege!" Mad Lion Douluo roared, his form warping into a maddened lion as a radiant light coalesced around him. A colossal golden lion manifested and led the cavalry to crash into the walls. Armored infantry poured up the ramparts, pushing toward the gate, while armored chariots pounded forward with irresistible force. A golden light shield flashed into being with Mad Lion Douluo's aura, enveloping the attacking units as they barreled toward Jialing Pass like rampaging bulls. Under the weight of the charge, Emperor Xuebeng had no choice but to order, "Attack!" The defenders answered with a ferocious roar, and the two forces locked in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The clash shook the ground. A thunderous boom reverberated through the pass. Suddenly, a surge of light burst from Xuebeng, forming a protective field that intercepted the Spirit Empire's siege fire and kept the attackers from making immediate gains. The fighting turned into a slaughter. Flesh and blood flew, spirit abilities flared like fireworks, and the battlefield became a storm of wind and gore. The city gate was breached. Soldiers piled up at the breach and died by the hundreds. Explosions kept tearing the air apart. Fireballs erupted, sending mushroom clouds skyward. Despite the devastation, the Spirit Empire pressed on, unable to be stopped by bombardment alone. Armored chariots accelerated, heavy cavalry reached the city foot, and the roar of the charge filled the heavens. Even with the advantage of the walls, the Heaven Do defenders were being ground down by the relentless assault. "Order! Prepare to break the city," Qian Xunan commanded. The armored infantry slowed to form, the chariots behind them built speed, and the heavy cavalry gathered to strike, intent on smashing the walls to dust. Xuebeng stood on the ramparts, solemn, eyes locked on the approaching armored legion. The attackers were hulking figures in thick plate, bristling with long, heavy spears and massive shields that looked like iron towers. Their footfalls seemed to make the earth itself quake. Then, like a falling star, a golden meteor hurtled toward Jialing Pass. It was a colossal sea god trident, a weapon of crushing power that struck like a collapsing mountain. The moment it hit, the world seemed to twist under the force of the blow. With one terrible impact, an endless spray of red blood burst forth. 138, Tang, the sea god, a heavy infantryman, without even a chance to react, was cleaved in two by that terrifying blow. The aftershock from the trident sent a distant house tumbling. Qian Xuan's face changed. "Sea god trident? It's the sea god!" A golden figure descended from the sky. "Tang San," Qian Xuan breathed. Tang San radiated an almost blinding golden light. The damage from that strike alone would have been enough to kill any titled Douluo instantly, thanks to the sea god trident. He was no longer the Tang San they remembered. He had become something like a god. Tang San landed on the city wall and said in a deep voice, "Leave it to me." Golden light burst from his eyes as he hefted the sea god trident. Columns of water streamed from it, enveloping and shielding the Heaven Do soldiers. "It's Teacher!" Xuebeng cried, joy lighting his face. "Teacher's back. Tang San, you've finally come back as a god," Tang Xiao said from the side. "We're counting on you," Ning Fengji added. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Tang San. "Heaven Do will win," Tang San shouted. His voice carried 20 li and reached the walls of Jialing Pass, sweeping across the million-strong Heaven Do army like a banner. "Hey, Vendo will win. Blue Silver King will win." Boom, boom, boom. With each word, the army advanced a step. The soldiers echoed the cry again and again, and the force of each shout seemed to increase their momentum. The pressure of the combined voices formed a tangible, surging sound wave that rolled toward Jialing Pass. Tang San moved like a golden meteor, sea god trident in hand, charging into the Spirit Empire ranks. In this state, even a casual swing could send dozens to their deaths. Each strike reaped multiple lives. A golden vortex condensed fully around him. He was a living grinder. Anything in his path shattered and vanished. At Xuebeng's nod, Marshal Gei Long lifted his longsword and ordered the charge. The Central Infantry abandoned the siege engines and surged straight for Jialing Pass, at least 200,000 men in the first wave. The frontline infantry each carried a wooden board, about a meter by 1.5 meters, strapped to their backs, a curious, deliberate formation. The Spirit Master Legion and the Tang clan army surged forward as well. Seeing the destroyed drawbridge, Tang San's lips curved into a cold smile. They had anticipated this. "Sword Douluo, act," he commanded. Chen Qian gave a low cry. The 7-kill sword leapt from his hand. The 9th black star on it flared. Wind tore at the blade as it swelled into a giant sword descending from the sky, not toward the city, but at the moat itself. Boom! When the 7-kill sword struck, the moat split as if cleaved by a single colossal blade. The sword chi almost severed the waterway. It didn't stop the flow, but it left a 10-meter-wide chasm at each strike, sloping down into the moat. Qian Xunji was not finished. Sword shadows flashed in the air, 13 strikes in all, spaced evenly along the moat, each leaving an enormous gap descending into the water. The full force of a 97th level titled Douluo was on display. Those 13 strikes carried a deterrence no less fearsome than Tang San's earlier 4 flying tridents. When the final blow landed, the 7-kill sword returned to its original size and flew back into Sword Douluo's hand. His face was pale. He panted as he steadied himself. Before Qian Xunji fully recovered, Tang San hurled the sea god trident for the 5th time, but his target surprised even his allies. He didn't throw it at the city. The trident flew blade up, handle down, and plunged into the moat. Tang San wore a faint sneer. His right index, middle, and ring fingers pressed to the sea god imprint on his forehead, and his spirit and energy surged to their peak. Even Tang San hadn't expected the battle to go so smoothly. There had been no fierce resistance. The Spirit Empire army seemed almost to be waiting silently, sending no spirit masters out to meet them. He thrust his right arm forward, those 3 fingers still pressed to his brow, pointing at the spot where the trident had entered the water. A condensed, powerful golden light shot into the moat. The instant the light hit the water, a massive golden phantom rose behind Tang San. Its majestic aura cowed every spirit master, on the wall and off. Everyone felt something strange. Although Tang San still stood on the bank, it seemed as if he and the moat had become one. The water, churned by Qian Xunji's strikes, froze in a single instant, smooth as a mirror. Ripples spread out, but they were not ordinary water ripples. They were rings of golden light. Sea God Tang San is here. Spirit Hall villains, do you dare attack the city? Tang San roared. He raised his right hand. Golden light pierced the surface. The sea god trident, which had sunk into the moat, rose into the air, radiating sacred light. The sea god's light at Tang San's forehead changed, from a direct beam into circular ripples that spread outward. The sea god's heart beneath the trident's blade flared with a brilliance that could not be looked at directly. Tang San pointed his right hand at Jialing Pass's walls. In midair, the trident angled toward the city. Under everyone's stunned gaze, the golden river water in the moat began to boil under the influence of the light. In a flash, all the water surged upward, lifted into the air. Even much of the moisture in the silt below was drawn up. On Sea God Island, the 7 sacred pillar guardian Douluo once controlled the sea within the sea using the sacred pillars. Tang San now wielded the true sea god trident, and his strength exceeded those guardian Douluo. A moat, though broad, was nothing compared to the ocean. Controlling it was trivial for a candidate for the sea god. The sea god controls all water. Every drop of the moat rose and, at Tang San's command, transformed into towering, surging waves. The water coalesced around Tang San like a living force and crashed directly toward Jialing Pass's city wall. Giant waves reared up, the moat's water swirling under his will. Standing before the Spirit Empire army, Tang San was utterly terrifying. End of chapter. At that moment, the titled Douluo from Spirit Hall surged forward. The few titled Douluo from the Heaven Du Empire finally realized that if they didn't act, things would only get worse. It was the classic clash of foes. One side had only 5 top-tier powerhouses, but was supported by a large number of rank 70-80 spirit masters. The other side had more than a dozen people, almost all top rank. The instant the two forces met, sparks flew. Sword Douluo swept his 7-kill sword, locking down 2 opposing titled Douluo. Bone Douluo laughed and engaged 2 more. With Ningfengji's full amplification, despite the 2-against-1 situations they faced, they never fell behind. Ning Rongrong poured out her amplification to the full. Daimub Oscar, Ma Hongjun, Juju King, Xiao Wu, Flender, Liu Erlong, and the others, bolstered by her, held off the rank 70-80 spirit masters. Brilliant spirit techniques lit up the Jialing Pass battlements. Although the 4 gate openings weren't small, The sheer mass of troops, especially heavy infantry legions, squeezing through made the passages extremely narrow. The walls themselves hindered movement. The Spirit Empire's Angel Legion and Sacred Dragon Legion had now thrown themselves into the fray. Over 10,000 Spirit Masters, riding on the army's cover, continuously unleashed a barrage of abilities at the gates, sometimes without regard for friend or foe. Flying Spirit Saints, advance! Wipe those bastards from the sky! A vigorous voice roared, and about 70 to 80 figures rose from the Angel Legion in an instant. Already nearly 100 Spirit Saints and Spirit Douluo were grappling with Tang San and his companions on the wall. Now another 70 to 80 flying Spirit Saints ascended, proof of Spirit Hall's deep reserves. At the same time, a flood of powerful spirit attacks burst from the Angel Legion's Spirit Masters. The Heaven Dew Empire's soldiers who had just charged through the breaches were met with brutal resistance. Angel Legion and Sacred Dragon Legion finally took the main battlefield, attack and agility systems in front, defense on the flanks, support in the rear. They sealed the four breaches and inflicted heavy casualties on the Heaven Dew Empire's charge. The Angel Legion was far stronger than anyone had imagined. Fortunately, the Heaven Dew Empire's Spirit Masters had not been idle. Led by the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School and the Tang sect disciples, they steadied the situation. Still, their numbers and individual strength lagged behind. For now, the best they could hope for was to avoid being driven clear out of the city. Then Qian Renchui's voice cut through. "Consecrated elders, make your move." The roars that answered were distant and powerful, like surging torrents. Across a battlefield of tens of thousands, those roars had an immediate dampening effect on the Heaven Dew Empire troops. The sound undulated through the air like repeated thunderclaps. Tang San, who had just used his halberd to shake off Bibi Dong's weakening control, stiffened. Though others might not hear anything distinct, his mental force registered the immense threat within those sounds. It was the combined roar of 6 people, and they were still 10 li away, yet their roars hammered into Jialing Pass as if right beside them. They were closing at an astonishing speed. For those people, 10 li was only a dozen or so short breaths. Vaguely, unwilling to admit it, Tang San guessed at the strength they must possess. More terrifying was that those 6 had not come alone. Behind them moved a group with long, steady breaths and equally swift pace, about 5,000 strong. What stunned Tang San most was that the combined roar of the 6 actually made his mental force waver for a moment. He could sense these facts, but not examine them in detail. The sounds had disturbed him, and they issued from the other side of Jialing Pass, undeniably from the Spirit Empire. 2 words instantly filled his mind: consecrated elders. The consecrated elders of Spirit Hall's Elder Palace had arrived. The 6 great consecrated elders swept out from their formations and ascended, confronting the massive Heaven Dew Empire army. Attacking Tang San were a pair of brothers, both white-haired, each appearing 80 years old, with remarkably similar looks and identical spirits. Each gripped a 12-foot coiling dragon rod wrapped by a golden dragon. They were Thousand Jun Douluo and Demon-Subduing Douluo. The spirit rings on their rods matched: 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 5 black, a 9-ring array, optimal under normal circumstances. Their spirit power's instantaneous pressure suffocated Tang San. These were no ordinary titled Douluo. Having reached rank 96, their mental forces were tightly unified. Not comparable to Tang San's, but if he tried to ambush one with a mental attack while the other defended, the second would surely counterstrike. There was no time to think further. The 2 rank 96 Douluo struck at once, one left, one right, one high, one low, swift and perfectly coordinated. The 3rd spirit ring of their rods flared, and the rods ballooned to several times their normal size. "I am the sea god. How can you shake me?" Tang San roared, and a blue-gold radiance burst out. Boom! Thousand Jun Douluo and Demon-Subduing Douluo were hurled back. Both spat blood, but neither was gravely wounded. At the same instant within Jialing Pass, 3 thunderous blasts shook the ground. 3 giant craters, each over 30 meters across, ripped between the Spirit Empire soldiers and the Heaven Dew Empire attackers. Limbs and bodies flew. The Heaven Dew Empire's momentum was cut off. 3 old men stood at the vanguard, composed. The Angel Legion and Sacred Dragon Legion's remaining spirit masters knelt on one knee and shouted, "Greetings, consecrated elders." Whether the three who'd appeared on the wall earlier or the three now before the army, their robes were the same, gold with silver embroidered patterns unique to each, representing their spirits. These golden robes with silver thread marked the consecrated elders of Spirit Hall's Elder Palace. An old man in identical golden robes had arrived onto the city wall as well. His eyes flashed, and his body was sheathed in fine golden scales. That earlier strike had come from hands transformed into claws. Behind him, a long, scaly, barbed tail trailed. This was the Golden Crocodile King spirit, a top-tier spirit. Gold Crocodile Douluo snorted coldly, planted his left foot, twisted, and swept that massive tail. Golden light and shadow streaked from the tail, aimed straight at Tang San. At the same time, he pressed his hands behind him and unleashed a strong golden barrier that shut down a golden sacred dragon attempting to aid Tang San. Killing intent burned in his eyes. A huge crocodile phantom rose behind him, and his sixth spirit ring flared. The phantom solidified and charged into the Heaven Dew Empire army. Even Tang San, feeling the pressure, was seized by an inescapable sense of doom. A rank 98, titled Douluo's attack at his current level was something he could not withstand. Then, an enormous black radiance like a dark sun surged up from beneath Jialing Pass and met the crocodile phantom with a crash. Tang Xiao had arrived on the wall in an instant. He faced Gold Crocodile Douluo and said, "Little San, leave this one to us." "All right," Tang San nodded. Gold Crocodile Douluo erupted with blinding golden light. Every scale along his body bristled. His white hair hardened into thick keratin that covered his head. He hunched forward like a giant crocodile. 9 spirit rings shone along him. The final ring burned red. Tang Xiao too released his fearsome clear sky hammer, but his last ring was only black, weaker than Gold Crocodile Douluo's red ring. Tang Xiao's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Gold Crocodile Douluo and snarled, "Spirit Hall, you massacred my clear sky sect, slaughtered so many of my people. Today, I'll make you pay." "Come on," Tang Xiao roared. Gold Crocodile Douluo wasted no words. His body blazed gold as he swung his huge tail like a steel whip across the air. The tail's passage warped the air into an illusion, making its true path nearly impossible to trace. The airflow screamed with sharp whistles and shockwaves. He relied on raw physical power rather than a spirit technique. Tang Xiao's response was equally elemental. He stepped forward with his left foot and slammed it to the ground. With a thunderous boom, a dense black light centered on that foot fused his body and hammer into one. The clear sky hammer shot out in a silent arc. Boom! The clear sky hammer and the crocodile tail met with a titanic clash. Terrifying shockwaves rippled outward like splashing water. 140. Sky versus ocean. On the other side, Qian Renshui moved as well. In an instant, she appeared before Tang San, the angelic sacred sword in her hand slashing straight at him. "Tang San, I will kill you today," she roared. Tang San met her gaze and replied evenly, "Qian Renshui, I'm a god now too. It's not certain who will kill whom." A terrifying aura erupted from him. Behind Tang San, within 1,000 meters, the sea boiled. Water surged upward into 1,000-meter-high waves. A gentle force pushed sea life outward, leaving only the purest seawater to ascend. Those distilled water elements condensed into a crystalline blue ribbon that spiraled up, guided by the sea god Trident. Qian Renshui did not wait for him to finish gathering his strength. The 100-meter-long sun-sacred sword plunged down from the sky. As it cleaved through the air, a cold black bolt of lightning flashed, an odd phenomenon left in its wake. In the blink of an eye, the crimson gold greatsword hovered above Tang San's head. Much of the rising water evaporated before it could condense, consumed by the terrifying true sun fire. The sea god Trident drew a vast arc. The newly forged sea god's heart flared, instantly pulling together the remaining water elements the sun's sacred sword hadn't destroyed. A huge blue-gold halo formed above Tang San's head, the first form of the Golden 13 halberds, unfixed storm. The sun's sacred sword's strike was actually diverted significantly by the pull of that halo. Qian Renshui's divine sense erupted, trying to shatter the unfixed storm halo. Tang San had foreseen her move. He released his own divine sense and lightly flapped the 8 sea god wings behind him. A wave of blue light shot into the sky, severing Qian Renshui's divine connection to the sun's sacred sword. Combined with unfixed storm, it neutralized the sword's attack. Crimson gold and blue gold streams of light braided through the air in a dazzling spectacle. Seeing the sun's sacred sword could not unleash its full power, Qian Renshui made a decisive move. For god-level fighters, 10,000 meters was but an instant. Sword and body united, she rocketed forward, the angelic sacred sword aimed straight at Tang San's chest. All the crimson gold flames poured into the blade until it became a transparent crimson gold crystal, its true sun fire visible and terrifying. 6 angelic wings unfurled behind Qian Renshui. A vast golden phantom rose, mirroring her form. She held the angelic sacred sword high, her phoenix eyes alight with killing intent, lips parting as she spoke 4 cold words. Angel, judgment. The air between heaven and earth trembled. Tang San felt as though something forced his body downward, a momentary squeeze that lasted less than a second, but it was enough. A clear golden light descended from the sky and enveloped him. This light did not come from Qianrai herself, but from the sun above. The light of judgment, one of the profound mysteries of the God of Angels, with appalling destructive power. An overwhelming heat spread through Tang San. His sea god divine gear flared with blue-gold radiance, resisting the golden light, but even so he was pressed down. Under the scorching beam, his movements slowed, and his divine force began to dissipate like melting snow. Sea god, devour! Tang San's voice was steady. He slowly raised the sea god trident amid the light of judgment. The diamond-shaped sapphire at the trident's core shone brilliantly. Blue-gold radiance surged outward from him and instantly formed a 10-meter diameter vortex that shoved against the surrounding light of judgment. Cold light flashed in Qian Renshui's eyes. As the wielder of the light of judgment, she clearly felt Tang San's resistance, but she would not cede the advantage. The angelic sword in her hand traced a cross in the air and became a crimson gold cross star that merged into the light of judgment. Angel, purify. Boom. The light of judgment detonated, expanding into a vast crimson gold sphere that swallowed Tang San and the blue-gold vortex he had formed. Tang San merged his sea god divine force with the sea god gear. The 8 wings behind him spread into a blue-gold shield, isolating the blistering true sun fire. Tang San turned the sea god trident and unleashed the 1,000 years of emptiness form behind him. Backed by his sea god power, this second form of the Golden 13 halberds erupted into full force. Intense roars filled the air. Chaotic energy fluctuations produced a violent explosion. A dragon-like roar echoed through the heavens as the sea boiled, and countless blue motes surged up from the water, converging on the dragon-shaped energy. Qian Renshui had concentrated everything into the true sun fire, attempting to refine Tang San. She couldn't divert her attention now. With the sea's blue motes joining, the dragon-shaped energy expanded rapidly. Within heartbeats, it grew to 100 meters, a blue-gold leviathan. What Qian Renshui condensed was true sunfire. Tang San condensed the true lunar water of the sea. The sun's energy might be stronger in principle, but it is difficult to control fully. Qian Renshui, as god of angels, could only borrow a fragment of the sun's power. Tang San, as sea god, could command the sea's full force. The 100-meter dragon, condensed from true lunar water, crashed into the furnace of true sunfire from behind. Hiss, a tornado of white mist shot skyward. The collision of those two extremes, true sunfire and true lunar water, distorted everything within a 10,000-meter radius. The swirling white mist detonated, and all airborne creatures within 10,000 li were obliterated in that instant. Qian Renshui held her right arm level, the angelic sacred sword forming a straight line. Crimson gold light blazed from every seam of her angelic suit. She formed a huge arc with her sword, and as its start and end points met, a crimson gold halo sprang up around her body. Within it, the crimson gold light surged like a sun descending behind her. Ang, Elik, domain. Raising the angelic sacred sword above her head, she unleashed the angelic domain, the exclusive realm of the god of angels. The sky immediately flooded with golden light. The crimson gold disk behind Qian Renshui shone like a second sun. Even the true sunlight between heaven and earth seemed to be filled with that golden glow, turning the distant sea to burnished gold. Under the holy light, Qian Renshui's form multiplied. 1 became 2, 2 became 4. Then countless Qian Renshuis filled the air. Each held the angelic sacred sword aloft, each backed by a crimson gold disc, and all of them pointed at Tang San. Tang San felt his body weigh millions. Even with god-level strength, he could hardly breathe under the oppression. Great Sun Angel, 10,000 suns over heaven, the countless Qian Renshuis intoned as one. Sound waves rolled, and the ground around Tang San cracked, inch by inch. Within the crimson sun's illumination, the land itself was slowly sinking. Tang San closed his eyes and raised the sea god trident toward the sky. His expression was solemn. The wave patterns on the sea god divine gear seemed to live. The 8 wings behind him beat slowly. Layers of water-blue halos spread from his body. Qian Renshui gave him no time to recover. Her attacks chained together, each blow more powerful than the last. The sea god trident hovered, and a wave-like blue light condensed around its shaft. The diamond gem at its center flared. From Tang San's body, concentric water-blue ripples burst outward. The sky was golden, but in that instant the earth turned blue. The seawater, briefly gilded by the angelic domain, reverted to its true color, sea god, mane. A pale blue mist rose from the endless water. The once turbulent sea calmed as if another ocean peeled away from the first. A vast phantom of the sea god slowly emerged behind Tang San, all 10 of Tang San's spirit rings blazing with light. Pure water energy surged from the depths, driven by his solidified divine sense, forming boundless, towering waves that swept up from the sea. Azure wave, sea god, endless azure. Tang San's voice was low and steady. It carried no aggression, yet at that moment his words became the ignition for the sea's power to erupt.